Hey guys, tonight we're going way back, like nobody has invented pants yet back. You're heading to ancient Mesopotamia, 4000 BCE, where the concept of a country doesn't exist, but people are definitely already arguing over who owns which goat. This is the land of the Sumerians, dusty, brilliant, and more advanced than they had any right to be. But here's your reality check. You probably won't survive this. Not just because of the heat, or the random city-state warfare, or the fact that your main food groups are bread, onions, and whatever doesn't try to eat you first, but because you're about to time travel into the dawn of civilization itself, and those early years, brutal. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from, and what time is it over there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the edge of a wide, flat land. The sun is already punching you in the face, and it's barely morning. The ground beneath your feet isn't quite sand and it isn't quite soil. It's cracked clay, pale and thirsty. The air smells like damp earth, burnt reeds, and something animal. In the distance you hear water. Not gentle trickling. This is more like a lazy beast dragging itself downstream. The Euphrates River, one of the two massive veins that make this place remotely livable. This is Sumer. The name sounds deceptively calm, like a sleepy summer village. It is not. It's a chaotic sprawl of tiny kingdoms where every city has its own god, king, dialect, and agenda. Think of it as the original version of Too Many Cooks in the Kitchen, except the kitchen is the cradle of civilization. Around you, there's activity. People moving like bees, some hauling woven baskets stacked with grain, others yelling over carts, donkeys braying like they've just read the tax code. Everything is made of mudbrick, walls, temples, houses. There's no stone here, no trees to spare. Just mud shaped by human hands and dried in the unrelenting sun. The cities are tight, layered, and buzzing. You duck down a narrow alley between homes, walls pressing in so close you can touch both sides with outstretched arms. The scent of baking bread wafts from a clay oven. A child runs past you, naked except for a belt of shell beads, shrieking with laughter. In a tiny courtyard, a woman grinds barley, her hands stained white with flour. There's a rhythm here, chaotic, sure, but pulsing with life. You're witnessing something unprecedented. Humans choosing to live in one place, to build up rather than move on, to organize instead of scatter. Before this, life was about chasing animals and seasons. Now, people are chasing grain and power. Why here, though? You look around again. It's hot, dry, and there's not a tree in sight. But right in front of you is the answer. Water. The Tigris and Euphrates don't just make the land fertile, they make it irresistible. Every year they flood just enough to leave behind rich silt. It's messy, sure, sometimes catastrophic, but it's also free fertilizer, courtesy of Mother Nature. And if you're clever, and Sumerians are nothing if not clever, you can dig canals, build levees, and basically become a water wizard. So yeah, you settle here. You farm. You build. You fight the water when it misbehaves and thank it when the barley grows tall. And then something happens. Something unprecedented. People stop just surviving. They start organizing. Not in a let's all share kind of way. More like, hey, who's in charge of storing the grain so nobody starves? Suddenly you've got administrators, you've got priests who say the gods told them how deep to dig the canals. You've got someone demanding extra barley taxes because they supervised the workers who built the storage shed. You may not love it, but you're part of the first working civilization. One historical fact: the city of Eridu, considered by many archaeologists to be the first city in the world, pops up right here in Sumer around 5400 BCE. Think of it as a prototype. Half temple, half mud village, full chaos. But from there it snowballs. Uruk, Lagash, Nippur, You blink, and suddenly there's a dozen cities squabbling over field boundaries, and whose god is fancier. But here's your quirky fact of the night. Sumerians were super into measuring things, not just in general, obsessively. They invented over a dozen systems of measurement, depending on whether you were weighing silver, plotting land, or counting fish. Imagine going to the store and asking for 3 gur of grain, while your friend buys 2 minas of onions. Precision was their love language. Now for the scholarly debate that still makes archaeologists frown at each other across dig sites. Who exactly were the Sumerians? We're not talking about names. We've got that they called themselves the black-headed people. But where did they come from? Their language doesn't match anything nearby. It's not Semitic like Akkadian. It's a linguistic orphan. No known relatives. Some theories say they came by sea. Others say they were always here, slowly evolving from earlier Neolithic cultures no one knows for sure. It's one of history's colder cold cases. Back in the city, someone shouts. You look up to see a procession winding through the main street, musicians clanging copper cymbals, priests in wool robes chanting, and in the middle a painted cart with an idol of the city's patron god. Probably Inanna or Enlil, depending on your zip code. The people bow as the cart passes, not because they're brainwashed, but because in Sumer, the divine and the daily are the same thing. Your city was founded by your god, the crops grow, or don't, based on their mood. That weird buzzing sound at night? Definitely demons. You live in a world soaked with the supernatural. It's comforting and terrifying all at once. As the sun begins to dip toward the horizon, the mud-brick walls glow gold. The city calms, merchants pack up, families gather. You hear a flute in the distance, children splashing in a canal, the soft thump of a drum. You lean against a wall, warm from the day's heat, and realise you've just witnessed the start of something massive. No flags, no speeches, no fireworks, just people, working together in messy, miraculous cooperation. Welcome to the beginning of civilization. It's going to get weird. You wake up to shouting. Not war, thankfully, just some guy yelling about sheep again. Your first full day in ancient Sumer starts early, because the sun doesn't wait, and neither do the canals. You drag yourself out of your reed mat bed, duck past two goats loitering in your doorway, and step into the warm dust of the street. Let's talk about why you're even here. This isn't just a random patch of desert. This is the Mesopotamian floodplain, one of the only places on Earth where you can throw some seeds into the ground and have a decent shot at food sprouting, if the rivers cooperate, that is. To your left is the Euphrates. To your right, a little farther, is the Tigris. These rivers are your lifeline and also your most annoying neighbours. Every year they overflow, flooding the land unpredictably. It's a gamble. Sometimes it's the perfect amount of silt-rich goodness. Other times your entire barley crop goes swimming. But you're Sumerian now, and Sumerians, they don't just shrug and move upstream. They build. You head down a raised walkway, past some guy patching a canal wall with tar and reeds. The canal itself snakes like a shallow, muddy vein into the city's belly. You follow it, watching the water carry little bits of debris, leaves, a broken reed pen, a frog just vibing. This isn't just irrigation. It's transportation. It's drinking water. It's the ancient version of Wi-Fi. Nothing works without it. Here's the thing. Most early civilizations pop up near rivers. Egypt has the Nile, India has the Indus, China has the Yellow. But Sumer gets two, and neither of them behaves. They're flashy, unpredictable, and occasionally mean. So to live here, you have to get serious about water engineering, which is exactly what your ancestors did. By now, around 3000 BCE, this place is basically a man-made swamp network. You've got canals everywhere, some wide enough for boats, others barely more than ditches. Every city is a hydrological spaghetti of levees, dams, and sluices. It's like if Venice, Las Vegas, and a very muddy spreadsheet had a baby. And it's not just for farming. You spot a merchant boat slipping past loaded with baskets of dates and sheepskins. Farther up, a fisherman pulls in a net wriggling with riverfish. Scrawny little guys, but still. The economy literally floats here. One historical fact for today. The Sumerians were among the first humans to practice large-scale irrigation. Not just digging a trench and calling it a day. They coordinated entire civic projects to manage water distribution between districts and fields. There are ancient maps, etched on clay tablets, showing field boundaries, canal networks, even disputes over who diverted too much water and ruined someone else's millet. But not everyone's impressed. You overhear two old men arguing near a palm tree. One claims the canals were better before the king started meddling. The other says the gods are punishing the city because the high priest forgot a ritual. That's Sumer for you. Always a mix of politics, plumbing, and divine PR management. Now for the weird fact of the night. Sumerians believe there were literal demons lurking in the swamps and riverbanks. Not metaphorical ones, real ones. Like, if your boat tips, it wasn't bad luck. It was a water demon pulling your ankle. They had spells, amulets, and full-on exorcism rituals just for swamp spirits. So yes, while you're trying not to drown your barley in irrigation runoff, you also have to worry about invisible forces with attitude problems. The scholarly debate here, whether Sumerians invented large-scale irrigation, or if they inherited it from earlier, more obscure groups like the Ubaid culture. Some archaeologists argue that the earliest settlers were already tinkering with basic water controls centuries before the cities got involved. Others think the real explosion of irrigation only happens once cities start needing grain quotas. Either way, the evidence is buried under layers of sediment and long-decayed bureaucracy. You turn a corner and suddenly step into brightness. A sun-baked field just beyond the city wall. A group of farmers is ankle-deep in mud, shouting instructions, swatting flies, and moving like a well-practiced team. You join in, grabbing a wooden shovel to scoop silt into a break in the levee. It's heavy, wet, and absolutely disgusting. 10 minutes in and you're sweating like a baked onion. But there's a rhythm to it. Scoop, pat, move. Water levels change subtly as you work, like the land is breathing. You realise this is more than agriculture. It's ritual. It's life. You don't just grow things here. You engineer life into the desert, one muddy scoop at a time. As the sun climbs, the farmers break for a quick snack. You sit with them under a tiny bit of shade, a mat thrown over some sticks, and share a simple meal. Barley bread, a few dried dates, and a drink that smells suspiciously like early-stage beer. It's sour, a little funky, but cold, and kind of amazing after all that digging. They talk about the weather, the priests, and one guy who's convinced his donkey is cursed because it keeps kicking his wife. You just nod, soaking it all in. After the break, you head back through the city gate. There's a guy standing just outside holding a waxed clay tablet. He's a water official. Think of him as an ancient HOA board member, but dustier. He asks you how much flow you diverted, how many workers were present, and whether you maintained your share of the communal levy. You give vague answers and hope he's in a good mood. He's not. He scratches something onto his tablet. A fine, a warning, a curse? You'll find out later. Welcome to the world's first experience of red tape. As the day winds down, the city begins to glow with golden light again. Children splash in the smaller canals. You see a couple sitting by the water, feet dangling, faces tired but calm. A scribe walks by, muttering to himself, clutching a stylus and a tablet half-scrawled with numbers. You pause by a tree, well, a struggling shrub, and look out over the flat horizon. In the distance, another city looms. Faint but unmistakable Lagash. Uma? Doesn't matter. Each one is a sibling, a rival, a fellow player in the grand experiment of civilization. Here, where rivers refuse to behave, humans learned how to shape the land. Not with force, but with flow. Not with walls, but with channels. They took chaos and made it feed them. You brush a bit of dried mud off your tunic and realise something else. You're not just watching the invention of agriculture or irrigation, you're watching people realise they can change nature itself. And that, more than anything, is what makes this civilization. So now that you've wrestled mud, dodged bureaucrats, and sweated through your linen tunic in the name of irrigation, let's talk about where you go to crash after a long day in ancient Sumer. Home, sweet mudbrick box. You shuffle through the city's winding alleys, walls closing in like a maze of baked earth, and finally duck into a modest doorway. It's just tall enough for you to bash your forehead if you're not paying attention, which of course you do. Inside your house is a cosy one-room cube, maybe two if you're fancy, with reed mats on the floor, an open hearth, and exactly 0 chairs. Furniture is either a woven basket, a clay pot, or the floor. Occasionally all three at once. You slump down beside a low table. It's been smoothed by years of elbows and spilled beer. The walls glow with that warm, dusty pink only sun-baked clay can give you. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that lets out smoke and occasionally lets in birds. You squint up at it now and catch a glimpse of fading blue sky, already turning gold. The smell of roasting onions drifts in from a neighbour's hearth. Somewhere, someone is playing a lyre badly. It's not glamorous, but it works. These houses, these mud-brick dreams, are the true heartbeat of Sumer. Not the temples, not the palaces. It's here, in these humble little cubes that civilization breathes. Families eat, argue, sleep, and tell stories. The city's bones may be walls and canals, but its soul lives in these tiny spaces. And here's your historical fact. Mudbrick was the building material of choice in Sumer. Stone was rare, wood even rarer. So what do you use? Dirt, mix it with chopped straw or crushed reeds, press it into moulds, and leave it out to bake in the sun like cookies on a hot driveway. Voila! Bricks. With enough of them, you can build anything. Houses, temples, city walls, the entire foundation of human civilization, really. Of course, mudbrick isn't exactly known for durability. Rain turns it to mush. That's why Sumerian buildings didn't last like stone temples in Egypt. It's also why cities got built on top of cities, layer by layer, until they became artificial mounds called tells. You're living on a version of Sumer that's maybe the 4th or 5th rebuild beneath your floor. Someone else's house, maybe several someone's. As night falls, you light a clay lamp. It's filled with fish oil and it smells like it. But the flicker is comforting, bouncing soft amber light off the walls. Your family gathers. Siblings, parents, maybe even a grandparent who insists everything was better when kings actually listened to the gods. Everyone settles in, scooping dinner from a shared bowl with flatbread, the original edible spoon. Outside, the city murmurs in low tones. Dogs bark. Somewhere, a baby cries. You hear footsteps splashing through the muddy lane outside. Probably someone heading to the communal oven, because fun fact, most homes didn't have their own. Too expensive, too smoky, too likely to burn down the neighbourhood. The city is built like a beehive clustered for shade and safety. Rich folks live near the centre, close to the ziggurat and the temple bureaucracy. You're a little farther out, near the edge of the wall but not too close to the gates. That's where things get noisy and dangerous. And here's your quirky fact. Some wealthier Sumerians had rooftop patios. Think about that. Thousands of years before air conditioning, they realised the roof is the only place with a breeze. On hot nights, entire families would haul their mats up a ladder and sleep under the stars, swatting away mosquitoes and telling stories. It's kind of romantic, until it rains. Speaking of weather, here's a twist. Sumer had seasons, but they weren't fun. You get flood season, mud everywhere. Planting season, mud with hope. Harvest season, less mud, more back pain. And dust season, when the wind casually tries to exfoliate your face with airborne clay. Pick your poison. But scholars still debate just how consistent life really was here. The popular idea is that Sumer was this peaceful, clever place. Everybody building and writing and playing music. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find signs of constant rebuilding. Fires, floods, partial walls, abandoned homes. Some think these cities collapsed and revived over and over, that this wasn't a steady rise but a chaotic experiment, one that somehow worked despite itself. You lie back on your reed mat, stomach full, legs tired. The oil lamp burns low. From across the alley you hear someone singing, soft, repetitive, almost like a lullaby. It might be a hymn to Inanna, the goddess of love and war. Or maybe it's just a mother keeping her kids from climbing the walls. You close your eyes. It's been a long day. You built canals, dodged fines, survived the local fish beer, and came home to a place that exists because someone decided mud, when stacked just right, can change the world. You don't have electricity. You don't have windows. You certainly don't have a bathroom. Don't ask where you're going to the bathroom. But you do have a roof over your head, a city around you, and, whether you like it or not, a civilization that's just getting started. Tomorrow you'll head toward the temple quarter. There's something stirring there. Something about priests needing more scribes. Something about grain tallies and clay tablets. But for now, just listen to the quiet thrum of the city sleeping. Somewhere out there the Euphrates gurgles in its sleep. For a pile of bricks and a whole lot of hope, it's not a bad start. You wake up with a reed mat imprint on your face, and the distant sound of someone yelling at a goat again. The sun is barely peeking over the rooftops, but the city is already alive, buzzing like a clay beehive. Today, you're headed somewhere special. No more mud hauling or canal patching. You're going to the temple district, or as the locals call it, the place where all decisions get made whether you like it or not. You shuffle along the narrow streets still groggy, past carts loaded with dates, sheep nibbling at garbage piles, and scribes already elbow deep in clay tablets. The city of Uruk, if that's where you are, doesn't really believe in sleeping in. Too much to count, too many gods to keep happy. Then you see it. Rising out of the skyline like a giant sun-blasted wedding cake is the ziggurat. Massive, tiered, and absolutely extra. It looks like someone tried to build a mountain out of bricks and got carried away. Halfway up you shield your eyes. At the very top, shimmering in the morning haze, is the temple to Inanna, goddess of love, war, and generally being terrifying. This place isn't just religious, it's also the first city hall, data centre and tax office in history. Everything flows through here. Grain, livestock, prayers, and power. And you've been summoned. Why? Well, you're kind of a big deal now. Someone noticed you can hold a stylus without breaking it, which means you're being recruited into the ancient world's hottest new career, scribe. You follow a priest through the temple gates, where the air instantly smells different, like incense, crushed flowers, and too many layers of perfume trying to cover up the fact that this building is still made of mud. The walls are covered in carvings, lions, bulls, people bowing, gods floating in boats. Every image is a flex. Inside it's quieter, cooler. The kind of cool that comes from thick walls and centuries of secrets. You're led into a small chamber. No torches, just slits in the ceiling letting in golden light. There's a table, some baskets, and a boy, maybe 12, furiously scratching into a clay tablet with a stylus. His tongue sticks out in concentration. You glance at his work. Little wedge-shaped marks, carefully arranged in rows. Cuneiform. Here comes your historical fact. Sumerians invented writing, like the actual first system of writing. Not pictures or symbols, but full-blown written language. It started around 3200 BCE, purely practical at first. Not for poetry, not for love letters, but for receipts. That's right. The first thing humans ever wrote down was basically, 3 goats paid, don't come back asking for more. Cuneiform means wedge-shaped, because the stylus leaves little impressions that look like you dropped tiny Doritos onto wet clay. At first, it's just bookkeeping, grain totals, sheep inventories, temple donations. But soon, the system evolves. You get verbs, names, even emotions. Eventually, cuneiform becomes powerful enough to tell stories. But today, you're just here to practice writing barley 50 times. Your instructor, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers and the patience of a cracked tablet, hands you your stylus. It's made of reed, carved into a little triangular tip. Then he slaps down a square of wet clay and nods. Go ahead, try not to mess it up. You press the stylus in, too hard, the clay cracks. He sighs like someone who's seen too many rookies butcher perfectly good tablets. You try again, and again. After your 5th attempt, you finally get a semi-recognizable wedge. The instructor grunts, not praise exactly, but maybe the Sumerian equivalent of a slow clap. By midday, your hands hurt, your back hurts, your head is spinning from learning new signs. Some symbols mean whole words, others are sounds. There's no alphabet, just hundreds of little shapes to memorize. It's like being handed a pile of IKEA instructions written by a drunk accountant. And here's your quirky fact. Sumerian scribes didn't write seated at desks. They squatted. That's right. Full knees to your chin, squat and write mode for hours. Every day. Modern archaeologists trying to replicate it basically tap out after 15 minutes. Apparently ancient glutes were built different. At lunch, you step outside and sit on the temple steps. The city hums below. A long line has formed at the base of the ziggurat. People bringing offerings, complaints, petitions. Some hold baskets of fruit, others jars of oil. One guy is dragging a goat that clearly does not want to be sacrificed today. You watch it all, and something clicks. This temple isn't just about worship. It's where the city gets organized, where records are kept, where land is measured, where disputes are solved. If the palace is the muscle, the temple is the brain. But not everyone agrees on the power dynamic. Cue tonight's scholarly debate. Who really ran Sumerian cities, the priests or the kings? Some argue it started with the temples. Priests held the grain, ran the schools, talked to the gods. Then came the Lugal, big man, the king figure, who took charge of armies and taxes. Others believe it was always a combo. Either way, one thing's clear. Politics and religion in Sumer weren't separate. They were just different hats worn by the same guy. Back in the scribe school, you're introduced to a new exercise. Copying a letter from a merchant to the temple. The message? He's demanding compensation because someone shorted him on barley. You don't need the instructor to tell you this is common. Every transaction needs a record. Every promise needs a tablet. One clay slip-up could ruin a trade deal. Or worse, get you accused of theft. That's why scribes matter. They're the human flash drives of this era. By the end of the day, your tablet pile has grown. Most of it is barely legible, but hey, you didn't shatter anything. That's progress. As the sun sinks, casting long shadows over the ziggurats bricks, you walk home, stylus tucked into your belt like a badge of office. You pass stalls selling onions, beer jugs, and little clay figurines of gods. A group of kids is playing a game with pebbles and palm seeds. One of them yells in perfect Sumerian, "No cheating this time." You grin. The city might be ancient, but kids yelling about cheating? Eternal. You reach your house, your fingers still smelling faintly of clay. Tomorrow you'll be back in the temple, practicing the same words. But someday soon, you'll be writing contracts, laws, maybe even stories. You have no idea that thousands of years from now, some archaeologist in a sun hat will dig up your tablet, brush off the dust and whisper, "What the heck is this supposed to say?" But you're not writing for them. Not yet. You're writing for the gods, the merchants, the priest who really wants that goat documented correctly this time. For now, that's more than enough. The city wakes with a groan today. Slow, dusty, and slightly hungover. There must have been a festival last night. You can still hear faint drumming echoing from the temple district, and someone is definitely passed out under a date palm hugging a jar that used to contain beer. But you're up early, not because you're motivated, but because someone banged on your door shouting that the Ensi, that's the city's ruler, is holding court, and in Sumer, when the Ensi says jump, you jump. Or at least act like you're going to. You throw on a decent tunic, run a bit of water over your face, and slip out into the still cool morning. The sun hangs low, golden and sleepy. The city feels different today. Tense, expectant. You pass markets half open, stalls still being set up. A woman yells at her son for spilling lentils, a goat pees on someone's sandal. Civilization in its rawest form. As you approach the city square, you start to hear the buzz. People are gathered around the central platform, the judgment seat. It's a raised dais of mudbrick, decorated with carvings of lions, birds, and gods who look vaguely disapproving. The crowd parts slightly as the Ensi arrives, draped in finely woven wool, beard oiled and curled to perfection. Sumerians were big on beards. That's your quirky fact for the day. These weren't just facial hair, they were art projects. Men would oil, comb, braid, and occasionally crimp their beards into elaborate shapes. Royalty and elites had beard styles that were basically status updates. If your beard looked like it took 5 hours to sculpt, you probably didn't dig canals for a living. The Ensi steps up, flanked by guards and, of course, a scribe. You recognize the guy. He once gave you side-eye for misspelling sheep. Classic. A man is brought forward. He's dirty, wild-eyed, and clearly furious. His tunic's been ripped, and his hands are shaking. He accuses his neighbour of stealing his ox. The neighbour, calmer but just as indignant, claims the ox wandered into his field by accident. This could get ugly. But here's where things get interesting. The court doesn't go full chaos mode. There's no shouting match, no trial by combat, no blood sacrifice. Not today, anyway. Instead, they call a witness. Then another. Then the scribe reads out a previous land record preserved on clay that shows who owned what. Justice, Sumer style, is based on documentation. Records are everything. Your historical fact tonight? The Sumerians developed some of the first systems of law. These weren't as famous as Hammurabi's later Babylonian code, but they paved the way. Judges, witnesses, contracts, punishments, they're all here. Legal proceedings were public and scribes documented everything. If you couldn't prove it on clay, it didn't happen. The crowd watches in silence. Finally, the Ensi raises his hand and issues a ruling. The ox goes back to the original owner. The accused pays a fine, a small jar of oil and 2 goats. The scribe nods, etches it into his tablet, and just like that, it's law. You walk away impressed. Not because it was fair, though it was, but because it was organised. This is a world where the gods may run the heavens, but down here, people are building something remarkably human, a society of rules. But don't get too comfortable. This isn't a utopia. Justice depends on your class, your gender, your connections. If you're poor, justice moves slowly. If you're rich, it moves like a chariot on fresh cobblestone. And that brings us to one of the spicier scholarly debates. Who really had power in Sumer? The priest-kings or the collective council? You see, in many city-states there was a kind of early democracy, not the everyone votes kind, but elders and city leaders would gather in councils, offering advice or even overruling decisions. Some archaeologists think this was more collaborative than later kingdoms. Others think the king just nodded, then did whatever he wanted anyway. It's still up for debate, written somewhere deep in the archaeological layers, and maybe on a tablet nobody's translated yet. Back in the square, the crowd disperses. A woman with a basket of fish tries to strike up a deal with a soldier. A child chases a chicken across the plaza, business resumes. But you're still standing there, staring at the now empty platform. You think about what it means to live in a world where law is written, not shouted, not enforced by whoever has the biggest stick, but documented. That's civilization in action, not fancy walls or beer on tap, though both are appreciated. It's the idea that disputes can be settled by something other than violence. And that idea, it's brand new. As you wander back toward the temple, your feet crunch on the dusty stone. You pass another public notice board. Just a slab of wall with clay tablets stuck into it. Messages, warnings, market news. One is a complaint about a stolen donkey. Another is a poetic hymn to Enlil. Someone's even scratched a crude drawing of what is either a fish or a very sad god. You remember something the scribe told you yesterday. A word on clay is stronger than 10 men with spears. At the time, you thought he was just trying to motivate you to practice your signs. But now, maybe he wasn't wrong. You get back home just in time to help your neighbour fix a collapsed wall. Mudbrick buildings are charming, but they're also fragile. You grab a bucket, mix some fresh clay and start patching. As you work, you think about the city, the way it holds together, the way it could fall apart at any moment if people stopped agreeing on the rules. Because that's the thing, Sumer isn't strong because of its walls. It's strong because people believe in the systems, in the scribes, in the court, in the gods, sure, but also in each other. The sky turns orange again. Another day ends. You sit on your roof with a bowl of lentils and some rough bread, dipping and chewing while the stars blink awake overhead. Somewhere, someone plays a flute. Dogs bark in the distance. A couple argues 3 rooftops over about whether or not the new priest actually knows what he's doing. Civilization isn't clean. It's not even particularly noble. It's messy, loud, and very human. But it works, somehow. You lie back on the warm clay, hands behind your head, staring at the stars. Inanna's star, the bright one, is rising in the east. You wonder if she's watching, if she approves, if she cares. Probably not. But down here, in your tiny world of mudbrick, barley, and laws etched in clay, things are just starting to come together. You're back at the temple district today, but not for more scribe training. No, today you're on construction duty, which is ancient Sumerian for move heavy stuff, try not to die. You've been roped into helping raise something monumental, a ziggurat. That's right, it's your turn to stack bricks for the gods. You trudge along the pathway, past carts creaking under the weight of mudbrick, past women weaving temple banners, past priests barking instructions like they're building the Tower of Babel. Spoiler alert, they're not yet, but this is pretty close. You squint up at the beast. The ziggurat looms like a 3-tiered wedding cake made entirely of clay and stubbornness. Each level is slightly smaller than the one below it, and the whole thing is slathered in bitumen. Thick, tar-like goo that smells like ancient roadkill but helps hold the bricks together. Your task? Carry bricks, lots of them. You grab one from a pile. It's warm even at this hour and still slightly damp. You haul it up a ramp to the next tier, muscles burning before you even reach the halfway point. This, you realise, is the Sumerian gym. No treadmills, just bricks, gravity, and divine pressure. Ziggurats weren't just big mud monuments. They were literal stairways to the heavens. The gods lived up high, after all, and the Sumerians? They were committed to making real estate convenient for their deities. Here's your historical fact for today. The ziggurat was one of the signature architectural forms of ancient Mesopotamia, especially in cities like Ur and Uruk. These towering platforms supported temples dedicated to major gods. The famous Great Ziggurat of Ur, built for the moon god Nanna, stood over 100 feet tall. For comparison, That's about 10 stories. Impressive for a time when most people lived in one-story mud cubes with goats sleeping in the doorway. But don't expect elevators or internal rooms. Ziggurats weren't hollow like Egyptian pyramids. They were solid inside. No secret chambers or trapdoors, just layers and layers of brick. The temple itself sat at the very top, accessed by massive staircases on each side. Only priests and royalty were allowed up there. The rest of you build it. You admire it from the ground. As you haul yet another brick to the top level, you pause to catch your breath. The view from here is actually incredible. The flat, sun-baked land stretches in all directions, canals sparkle in the light. You see farmers working in their fields, boats drifting down the river, and the rooftops of the city glowing like burnt gold. For a moment, you get it. The whole build a giant temple so your god has the best view in town thing. You get it. But then a brick nearly crushes your foot and you're snapped back to reality. Here's your quirky fact. The Sumerians believed their gods literally lived in the temples atop ziggurats, not metaphorically. They thought the gods came down, kicked off their cosmic sandals, and took up residence inside like divine Airbnb guests. Priests left food offerings, burned incense, and even tucked in the gods at night. There were temples with full bedroom setups for the deity. Beds, combs, makeup palettes. Yes, Inanna might have been the goddess of war, but she still needed her evening routine. You finish your shift sticky with sweat and bitumen. As you stagger down the ramp, a priest intercepts you and hands you a little token, a clay ration chit. It's your payment. You'll take it to the temple storehouse later and exchange it for bread, oil, and maybe even a splash of beer. Civilization, now with payroll. This whole system, labour in exchange for state-issued rations, is how the temple economy works. In fact, it's how most things work. The temple isn't just a religious centre. It's a warehouse, a bank, and a corporation rolled into one. It owns land, manages farms, runs workshops, and employs half the city. The other half probably works for the palace, which does more or less the same thing with fewer incense rituals and more yelling. This leads us into a hot little scholarly debate. Were temples the original centres of economic power in Sumer? Some argue they acted like the first central banks, controlling distribution of goods, managing surplus, and even issuing loans. Others say the palace took over that role pretty quickly, sidelining the temples as the economy grew more militarised. The truth is probably somewhere in between, buried under layers of bureaucracy and ancient IOUS. After collecting your ration, you swing by the temple kitchens. They're massive, smoky and chaotic, full of cooks shouting over open flames, stirring huge pots of stew and baking bread in dome-shaped ovens. The smell is divine, no pun intended. You nibble a chunk of flatbread and watch as a priestess places a neatly arranged platter of food, dates, onions, beer, maybe a tiny roasted bird, onto an altar. It's an offering, of course, but she also mutters something under her breath. A prayer. Or maybe she's just telling the gods to enjoy their lunch before the flies do. You wonder how much of this is sincere belief and how much is theatre. Do the priests really think the gods eat the food? Or is it symbolic? And what happens to the offerings afterward? Turns out, this is kind of awkward. They often eat them. Not in a stealing from the gods way, but in a blessed leftovers kind of way. Once the deities have consumed the essence, the priests help themselves to the physical part. Honestly, not a bad perk of the job. As you leave the temple district, the ziggurats still towering behind you, the city feels quieter than usual. Maybe it's the sun. Maybe it's the ritual weight of the day. You pass a scribe school, where young students are practicing on broken potsherds, muttering the same words over and over. You pass a marketplace where a woman is trying to trade a spindle for 2 fish and getting nowhere fast. You return home, drop your ration chit on the table and sit back. Your arms ache. Your tunic smells like swamp glue. But you helped build something that will last for generations. Well, unless it rains too much. From your doorway, you catch a glimpse of the ziggurat's top, just visible above the city walls. A solitary figure stands up there, probably a priest, maybe making a sacrifice, maybe just enjoying the view, and you wonder, not for the first time, if the gods really do live up there, if they watch, if they care, or if they're just an idea passed down in bricks and incense, powerful because you all agree they're powerful. Either way, tomorrow you'll be back at it. More bricks, more worship, more climbing. Because here in Sumer, Building for the gods isn't just religion, it's policy. You wake up with bitumen still under your fingernails and soreness in muscles you didn't even know you had. Brick hauling will do that to a person, but thankfully, today doesn't involve stairs or divine real estate. Today, you're headed somewhere sacred in a different way, the marketplace. You shuffle out into the early light, already warm and dust-choked, and head toward the city's open square. It's not a plaza like in the tourist brochures, which, don't exist yet, but more of a controlled chaos zone. The smell hits you first. A swirl of fish, baked bread, smoke, sweaty donkeys, and optimism. Welcome to the economic engine of Sumer. The marketplace is alive. Stalls made from reed mats and wood beams crowd together like gossiping aunties. Merchants yell over one another, voices rising in a chorus of pitches, prices, and very suspicious promises. There's a woman selling date wine next to a man hawking sheep intestines on a stick, and somehow both of them seem equally confident you'll walk away satisfied. You squeeze through the crowd. A boy nearly runs into you carrying a clay jug as big as his torso. Someone brushes past with a basket full of dried fish that smells aged. Everyone's bartering, everyone's moving. There's no money, not exactly, no coins, no wallets, just goods and goods, sometimes measured by weight, sometimes by volume, always by trust. Here's your historical fact. The Sumerians didn't use coins, but they did have a thriving barter system, eventually backed by standardized weights and measures. Trade was done in units of silver, grain, oil, or labor, and written receipts were issued on clay tablets. For large transactions, they even used metal rings and ingots as proto-currency. Clunky, sure, but better than carrying 5 goats on your back every time you needed groceries. You reach a stall covered in fabrics, dyed wool mostly in dusty reds and yellows. The merchant, an older woman with the sharpest eyes you've ever seen, sizes you up immediately. "You're not here to buy," she says. "You're here to learn how not to get robbed." Fair. She offers to show you the ropes, for a price. A short negotiation follows, mostly involving flattery and a quick sketch of your scribe badge in the dirt, that earns you a nod and an impromptu lesson in Marketplace Survival 101. Lesson 1, never accept the first offer. Lesson 2, never make the first offer. Lesson 3, if someone offers you a deal that sounds too good to be true, it's probably because the sheep is sick or the grain has worms. You watch her work. A customer approaches, eyes a tunic, and the merchant launches into a smooth, dramatic pitch about the wool coming from the best sheep in Lagash. The customer scoffs. They argue. They circle each other like cats. Eventually the merchant folds her arms and the customer, defeated by sheer performance, nods and trades 2 jars of oil and a spool of copper wire. "See," she says smirking, "it's theatre!" And that's the truth. Commerce in Sumer is not just transaction. It's ritual, power play, and sometimes outright con artistry. That brings us to your quirky fact of the day. The Sumerians invented receipts. That's right. Clay tablets with a record of who sold what to whom. Some even had tiny cylinder seal impressions that worked like a signature one merchant even signed with an image of himself spearing a lion. Real subtle. You wander further, taking in more of the market. There's a row of potters selling amphorae and jugs, a copper merchant showing off shiny ingots, a group of children throwing pebbles at a post, possibly gambling. A spice vendor tries to convince a man that what he's selling is genuine imported cinnamon, not crushed local bark. You're not sure even he believes it. Then there's the food. Oh, the food. You pause at a stall where a young girl hands you a freshly baked barley cake. It's dense, nutty, and warm from the oven. A man next to her offers a cup of watered-down date beer. It's tart, barely fermented, and surprisingly refreshing. You've had worse in temple kitchens. Eating in the market is an experience. There's no street food because the whole city is the street. People walk and chew, bargain and swallow dogs dart between legs looking for dropped crumbs. And at least one merchant is loudly claiming his figs cure constipation, divine curses, and heartbreak. Somewhere, a fight breaks out between 2 sellers, one accusing the other of stealing a shipment of garlic. They yell. A small crowd gathers. A scribe steps in with a clay tablet and stylus, ready to document whatever weirdness unfolds. You stand back. You've learned not to get involved in garlic-related disputes. And now the scholarly debate. How much of Sumerian trade was local versus long distance? We know for sure that Sumer traded with distant lands. India, the Persian Gulf, Anatolia. We've found Sumerian artifacts in places like the Indus Valley, and foreign goods like lapis lazuli in Sumerian graves. But did everyday people benefit from that global exchange, or was it reserved for elites? Some scholars say long-distance trade was state-run, with luxury goods going to temples and palaces. Others argue that even common merchants were involved, creating a proto-middle class that lived by their wits and their wares. The truth? Likely a messy combination of both. As the sun climbs and the market gets rowdier, you take a seat under a palm frond awning. You watch it all, the shouting, the bartering, the laughter, the low-key scams, and you realise something. This is civilization. Not the temples, not the ziggurats, but this moment, this place, where strangers agree in real time on the value of a fish or a bolt of cloth, where words are exchanged instead of weapons, well, mostly. Where trust, reputation, and a well-placed exaggeration can feed your family. This is the beating heart of the city, and as you stand up to leave, your fingers sticky from dried dates and your ears ringing from too many shouting merchants, you pass a final stall, an old man selling charms, tiny clay figurines, polished stones, weird symbols etched into bone. "Protects against bad deals," he whispers, grinning with one tooth. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Might work, might not. That's the gamble, isn't it? You drop a barley cake into his palm, take the charm, and walk away. Just in case. You're lying on your roof tonight, the city soft and golden beneath you, the ziggurat lit by torchlight like a divine nightlight. A breeze stirs the air, finally, and carries with it the sounds of singing, drumming, and the unmistakable buzz of people needing a story. That's right. Tonight you're going to experience a performance of the Epic of Gilgamesh, and no, it's not on Netflix. It's being shouted by a guy on a wooden crate in the middle of a courtyard, while children chase chickens in the background. You stretch, toss a tunic over your shoulder, and climb down the side ladder. The streets are cooler now, and the city has changed costume by day. It's labour and shouting and commerce. But by night, Suma slips into something more comfortable. Myth, music, a little dancing, and a healthy dose of wine someone's been brewing in a clay jar under their house. You follow the crowd toward the performance square. It's not an amphitheatre, those haven't been invented yet, but someone's cleared the area, and a few torches flicker in crude holders stuck into the mudbrick walls. A group of people are already seated on reed mats and overturned baskets. Someone hands you a skewer of roasted onion and something that might be rat. You don't ask, you take a bite. The storyteller is here. He's older, with the kind of voice that can cut through a marketplace and stop a goat in its tracks. He wears a plain robe, but around his neck is a symbol, maybe of Ninsun, the wild cow goddess appropriate considering she's Gilgamesh's mum. He begins, and just like that the city falls quiet. "Gilgamesh," he says, "king of Uruk, 2/3 divine, 1/3 man, strongest of all, and more annoying than a scorpion in your sandal." The crowd chuckles. They know this one. You lean back, chewing thoughtfully as the story unfolds. You've heard bits and pieces, everyone has. Gilgamesh, the hero king. Gilgamesh, the guy who beat up forest monsters and offended gods in record time. But tonight, you get the whole arc. Here's your historical fact. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the world's oldest surviving literary work. Versions of the story date back to at least 2100 BCE, though earlier fragments probably existed in oral form centuries before that. It was written in Sumerian, then Akkadian, and eventually Assyrian. Basically, every civilization that followed was like, yeah, let's keep this one. You hear about how Gilgamesh, a pretty terrible ruler, meets Enkidu, a wild man created by the gods to humble him. Enkidu eats grass, talks to animals, and generally lives his best naked life, until a priestess civilizes him with beer, bread, and intimacy. We're keeping it PG-13 here, but let's just say it was an extended scene. The two men meet, fight, become best friends, and proceed to go on a monster-slaying bromance tour. They kill Humbaba, guardian of the cedar forest, then the bull of heaven, which makes the gods understandably ticked off. And then Enkidu dies. Right there in the dirt square under the flickering torchlight, the energy shifts. The kids stop fidgeting. The storyteller's voice goes low, slow. Full of ache, Gilgamesh weeps. He rages. He wanders the earth, terrified of death, desperate for immortality. He meets Utnapishtim, basically Mesopotamian Noah, who tells him about the Great Flood, the Ark, and the gods' decision to wipe out humanity. You lean forward. This story feels strangely familiar, and that's not a coincidence. Your quirky fact tonight: the Sumerian flood myth predates the biblical one. The tale of a god-sent flood, a chosen survivor in a boat, and a dove released to find land. Yeah, Sumer did it first. Versions of this story show up in Sumerian texts like the Eridu Genesis, and later in the Epic of Gilgamesh, influencing flood myths across cultures. Eventually, Gilgamesh fails to find immortality. He loses the magic plant that would have restored his youth. He returns to Uruk, broken but wiser. He looks at his city, its walls, its people, and realizes that this is what lasts. Not glory, not youth, legacy. The storyteller finishes. There's a long pause. Then someone claps. Others join in. A few people wipe their eyes. One kid mutters, "Gilgamesh was kind of the worst," and his mum smacks him lightly on the head. You sit there, stunned. Because this story, it's ancient, it's full of gods and monsters, but it's also, weirdly you. It's about grief, about fear, about wanting to be remembered. And in this city of mud and barley where buildings crumble every other decade, you get it. You wander home under the stars, the names echoing in your head. Enkidu, Shamat, Ishtar, Utnapishtim. The air smells like torches and warm earth. You pass people still humming the tune of Gilgamesh's lament. Someone's already reenacting the Bull of Heaven fight with 2 sticks and a lot of dramatic grunting. And now for the scholarly hot take. Is Gilgamesh a cautionary tale or a celebration of early kingship? Some argue he's a proto-tyrant, meant to show the dangers of unchecked power. Others say the epic is a kind of royal redemption arc. Look, even the worst king can learn compassion. Then there's the wildcard theory that Gilgamesh represents the transformation from wild, instinct-driven society to a civilized written one. Basically, Enkidu is the wild human. Gilgamesh is the organized city. The whole story is a metaphor for you becoming us. Heavy stuff. You climb back onto your roof, roll into your mat and stare up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the gods might be watching, or maybe not. Maybe all that really lasts is a name etched in clay, a wall still standing, or a story whispered in a courtyard torchlight. And you think, maybe immortality isn't about living forever. Maybe it's about being remembered. You sleep in a little today. Not because life in ancient Sumer suddenly turned cozy, but because your legs are still mad at you from hauling bricks and reenacting the Bull of Heaven fight with the neighbourhood kids. Your glutes, frankly, would like a word, but the city doesn't wait. It hums on, alive with arguments and smoke and goats doing goat things in inconvenient places. You drag yourself out of bed, scarf down a chunk of leftover barley bread that could double as building material, and step outside into the dust. Just in time to hear shouting coming from the city wall. Not the usual kind of shouting. This is organised shouting. And when Sumerians shout in an organised way, you've either got a festival or a fight. Today it's the second one. You head toward the wall, dodging carts and curious onlookers. At the top of the gate tower, soldiers are gathering, tightening leather armour, sharpening copper blades that would definitely not pass any modern safety inspection. Below, farmers are herding their animals inside the walls fast. You pass a man dragging a large clay jar full of his entire life savings, which, from the sloshing sound, is probably beer. Welcome to City-State Warfare Sumer Edition. Here's your historical fact. Sumer wasn't a united kingdom. It was a hot mess of competing city-states. Uruk, Lagash, Ur, Kish, Umma, and more. Each with its own god, king, and healthy dose of superiority complex. They were basically siblings who shared the same river valley and never stopped punching each other over field boundaries. That's what today's fight is about. You overhear someone mutter that Umma has once again accidentally moved its boundary marker. Again. Between cities, these markers were sacred. Move one, and you weren't just claiming land, you were disrespecting the god that owned it. The result? War, or at least a really aggressive field trip. You scramble up onto a watchtower just in time to see it. A column of soldiers from your city, Lagash, let's say, marching out under a banner stitched with your patron deity's symbol, spears upright, shields worn, faces somewhere between confident and please let this be over by dinner. This isn't warfare as we think of it. No horses, no epic battles of tens of thousands. These are small, coordinated raids, hundreds of men, mostly infantry, hoping to damage property, steal crops, maybe rough up a few shepherds and dash back before things get complicated. This is the ancient equivalent of slashing someone's tyres and running. You pass through the inner wall and watch soldiers gear up. They wear leather jerkins and carry wicker shields, sturdy enough to deflect arrows, useless against sarcasm. Weapons are mostly copper-tipped spears and slings, though one guy is swinging around what might be a bronze dagger and a huge ego. Here's your quirky fact. Sumerian armies had professional soldiers, but they also used farmer conscripts. That's right. During planting and harvest seasons, wars paused because the economy literally couldn't afford to lose its farmers. Imagine invading your neighbour and then calling a truce because your onions are ready to pull. You wander into a command tent or, well, a patch of shade with some serious yelling going on, and hear generals debating strategy. Not in whispers either. It's more like a very aggressive chess match with shouting, map stabbing, and the occasional prayer. You catch phrases like divine favour, canal sabotage, and we're not fighting them during lunch again. This leads into a solid scholarly debate. Did Sumerian warfare have rules? Some scholars think there were unspoken codes: avoid temples, respect festival days, no full-scale sieges unless you really meant it. Others argue it was just chaos with a drumbeat. Evidence is murky, because while we have lots of tablets praising victories, we don't have the ancient version of Geneva Conventions. One thing is clear: war was personal. You weren't conquering the world, you were protecting your god's honour, your city's grain fields, and your access to water. Lose a skirmish, and suddenly your irrigation canal belongs to someone else. Not cool. Back in the city, the mood is tense. Women gather supplies, priests perform protective rituals, and somewhere, a child is still just chasing a goat because kids don't care if your civilization is at war. They have priorities. Later that day, a scout returns with news. Your soldiers won. They wrecked some irrigation dikes, chased off Ummah's men, and even took some enemy sheep, which they're now parading through the streets like victory trophies. One soldier rides back with a crude wooden sign that reads, "Nice boundary. We moved it back," in cuneiform. Sumerian sarcasm. Absolutely real. You end the day at the city square where a priest is performing a victory rite. A bowl of wine is offered to the gods. Music plays. Someone breaks out a drum. The city breathes again. But victory is never permanent. You know Ummah will be back. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next season, because these city-states are locked in an endless loop of conflict, not out of hatred, not even greed, really. Just survival. This land is fertile, but only just. Water is life, and water means canals, and canals need maintenance, boundaries, and constant negotiation. In a flat world with no mountains to hide behind, every inch of field is fought over like it grows gold instead of barley. You find yourself staring out past the walls as the sun sets, painting the fields in bronze and orange. Somewhere out there, the rival city is licking its wounds, plotting, waiting, and so are you. And maybe, just maybe, you're beginning to understand something else. This isn't just politics or farming or even war. It's the birth of territory borders, identity. We are Lagash, they are Ummah, and between those words lives the entire concept of us versus them. The walls aren't just defence, they're definition. And inside these walls, you're starting to feel like something more than just a farmer, a scribe, or a brick hauler. You're a citizen. You wake up sore from sleeping on the roof, again, and immediately hear the unmistakable sounds of celebration. Drums, shouting, the occasional goat bleating like it's had too much date wine. It's festival day, which in Sumer means one thing. Time for some full-on chaotic god worship meets street party fusion. You sit up, stretch, and peer over the edge of your roof. Below, the street's already filling with colour and chaos. Bright wool banners sway from doorways. Women paint their eyes with kohl and wrap themselves in embroidered shawls. Musicians are tuning their lyres, by which we mean strumming and arguing over whose strings are the least out of tune. Today the city honours Lugal-Zagisi. Yeah, that guy. He's the current king of Ummah. Technically a Lugal, meaning big man, and, depending on who you ask, either a unifier of cities or the ancient world's most ambitious megalomaniac. But here's the twist. He's also your king now. Recently he marched into your city, declared himself in charge, and suddenly all your priests are pretending they've always liked him. You're not entirely sure if this festival is a religious tribute or a political PR stunt. Probably both. Here's your historical fact. Lugal-Zaggisi was one of the first rulers in Sumer to temporarily unify several major city-states under one crown. He ruled over Umma, Lagash, Uruk, and more, forming a kind of mini-empire just before Sargon of Akkad shows up to really mess things up. For a hot second, Lugal-Zaggisi was the guy. You walk into the main square where a procession is beginning. Priests lead the way, carrying golden idols of the gods on litters, Inanna, Enlil, Nana, all looking deeply unimpressed to be out in this heat. Behind them come the dancers, spinning and clapping, faces painted with red ochre, skirts flying. It's festive, yes, but also deeply sacred. These dances are rituals, said to invite the gods to join the celebration. Next come the politicians. The Ensi, now demoted under Lugal-Zaggisi's rule, walks with forced dignity. Behind him, a cluster of scribes furiously take notes on who bowed, who didn't, and whether that one guy in the second row rolled his eyes too hard. You're somewhere in the middle of the crowd, caught between reverence and skepticism, when someone shoves a small cup of something into your hand. It's thick, slightly foamy, and smells like fermented barley and regrets. Ah yes, Sumerian beer, again. Here's your quirky fact. Beer was the most common drink in Sumer, consumed daily by everyone. Men, women, children, scribes, even temple workers. It wasn't a luxury, it was a staple. Thick and porridge-like, often drunk through straws to avoid the floating chunks. And yes, there were many varieties. Strong beer, sweet beer, and the ominously titled beer that makes your heart forget. You take a sip. This one's more like beer that makes your mouth question its life choices. But you keep drinking. It's part of the ritual, after all, though the music swells. Suddenly a chant begins. Old Sumerian words echoing through the square, rhythmic and strange. You can't quite translate them all, but you catch phrases like grain giver, lord of the fields, and he who walks with the storm. Some are to the gods, some to Lugal-Zaggisi. That's where things get interesting, because here's where religion and politics start to do their very complicated dance. In Sumer, kings aren't gods, but they do claim divine favour. Lugal-Zaggisi is no exception. He's already ordered inscriptions calling himself king of the land, chosen by Enlil, and conqueror of the four corners of the world, which is pretty bold for a guy who still has to bribe priests to let him in the ziggurat. You see, this whole display, this festival, this chant, the parade of sacred goats, it's a performance, not just for the gods, but for you, for the people. It's how power maintains itself in a world without TV ads or campaign posters. Worship becomes politics. Politics becomes worship. And that's the scholarly debate for the day. Was Lugal-Zaggisi a religious figurehead, or a ruthless general who happened to wear nice robes? Some historians believe he genuinely tried to unify the fractious cities of Sumer under shared worship and law. Others see him as a short-term opportunist, whose empire was mostly scribbled into tablets after he conquered a city. There's even debate about how much territory he actually controlled at once, true empire or just a flashy alliance of city-states. The evidence is muddy as usual, like literally. Some of it is inscribed on broken bricks. Back in the square, a sacrifice is taking place. A ram, decked out in bells and beads, is led to the altar. A hush falls over the crowd. The priest raises a blade, not copper this time, but something sharper, likely imported. The act is quick, ritualistic. The blood spills into a channel carved into the altar stone. Offerings are placed. Bread, fruit, beer, and one slightly melted honey cake that no one seems to want to claim. This isn't just theatre. To the Sumerians, the gods are here, watching, listening, judging. The food is real. The chant is real. The sacrifice is real. And if the gods are pleased, the floods will be generous. The barley will rise tall. The city walls will hold. You're pulled into a dance circle. Someone grabs your hands and spins you into a rhythm that's been going on for hours. You don't know the steps, but it doesn't matter. Everyone's laughing, stomping, weaving in and out like reeds in the river. For a moment you forget your aching legs, your scribe duties, your concerns about empire and taxes and goat-related fraud. For a moment, you're just another black-headed Sumerian dancing for the gods and trying not to step on your neighbour's foot. As the sun dips and the torches flare, the festival begins to shift. The music slows, the dancers tire. A priest offers final blessings from a high platform, and people begin to drift back home. Some carry leftovers. Some carry hangovers in the making. You walk slowly through the emptying streets, the air warm and sticky with incense and sweat. The ziggurat glows in the distance. Somewhere, a child hums the chant you heard earlier. You can still taste the beer in the back of your throat, still feel the drumbeat in your ribs. And you realise something. Lugalzagsi might rise and fall, empires might come and go, but this messy, joyful, sacred city, this is what endures. Not just the rulers, but the rhythm. It starts with a rumour, not the fun kind. No one's claiming Inanna showed up in a dream wearing a golden headdress and giving out good harvest tips. No, this is the bad kind. The kind that slinks into the markets, slips under doors, curls into temple corners. He's coming. You hear it whispered behind baskets of onions, murmured in the shadow of ziggurat walls, scribbled into the margins of ration tablets. He's coming from the north, they say, a man who doesn't bow to the gods of Sumer, a man with an army made of wolves and fire. Okay, the wolves part might be dramatic. Still, you know the name before anyone says it aloud. Sargon. You'd roll your eyes if you weren't busy quietly panicking. See, here's your historical fact. Around 2334 BCE, Sargon of Akkad rises from somewhere up north, probably Kish, with a game plan no one in Sumer saw coming. He doesn't want a city. He doesn't even want 10. He wants all of them. And unlike every warlord who's tried and failed before, Sargon doesn't ask. He just shows up. You try to stay calm. After all, your city has walls, soldiers, gods, but there's something different in the air. Even the priests are acting weird. You see one quietly packing up a sacred statue into a basket and covering it with reeds. That's like hiding your Wi-Fi router before a storm, not a great sign. Over the next few days it escalates fast. Messengers arrive with tablets etched in panic. Umma's been taken, then Kish, then Nippur. Cities you thought were too far to worry about are suddenly burning, looted, or just eerily silent Lugalzagisi, your unifier, has gathered an army, but not fast enough. You hear rumours he tried to flee south. Someone else says Sargon captured him, put him in chains, and paraded him through the city of Nippur like a defeated piñata. The panic gets louder. So here's your quirky fact. After capturing Lugalzagisi, Sargon allegedly had him brought to the temple of Enlil in Nippur, the holiest city in all of Sumer, to show that even the gods approved of his takeover. It's the ancient equivalent of hijacking your rival's Twitter account and tweeting, "They actually like me better." As Sargon's forces draw near, your city turns frantic. The temple fills with offerings. People light incense like their lives depend on it. Children are kept indoors. Walls are checked. Armories are opened. The ziggurat looms overhead like a worried parent watching it all unfold. You pass your scribe school, now emptied of students. The instructor is still there, scratching onto a tablet so furiously you think it might catch fire. "What are you doing?" you ask. "Writing it down," he says without looking up, "so people remember." Because that's what scribes do. When cities fall, someone has to write the obituary. And now for the scholarly debate. Who was Sargon, really? Some say he was a cupbearer, a glorified waiter, who took advantage of a power vacuum. Others claim he was raised by a gardener and blessed by the goddess Ishtar herself. His origin story is muddy, mythic, and possibly manufactured. One version even has him set afloat in a basket on a river as a baby. Sound familiar? Yeah, these floodplain folk sure love their basket-born heroes. But however he started, one thing is clear. He didn't just conquer cities, he redefined how you conquer. He centralized, standardized, appointed governors loyal to him, not the temples. This wasn't a coalition, it was an empire. You don't sleep that night. No one does. The whole city is holding its breath, listening for footsteps that might come from the horizon. By morning, the smoke starts. Not here, not yet, but you can see it. A smear of black rising from the east, far enough that you pretend it's just a farmer's field burning. Then the ground trembles. Horses, chariots, spears. The Akkadians arrive. You've never seen soldiers like these. Their armour is shinier, their faces unreadable. They don't chant like your city's army. They move fast, clean, and terrifyingly quiet. They don't look interested in worshipping your gods. They look like they're here to rearrange your entire reality. The gate holds for maybe an hour, then the city folds. It's not chaos. Sargon doesn't do chaos. His men move with chilling precision. Temples are occupied, not burned. The ziggurat is guarded, not looted. Only the palace suffers. You hear Lugalsagisi's name shouted once, then never again. His body? Not seen. Maybe he's been taken. Maybe worse. You hide in your home, clutching your stylus like it can protect you. And then, the knock. Not a soldier. A scribe. He enters calmly, rolls out a clay tablet and says, "We're updating records. Your ration now belongs to the House of Akkad." You stare at him. "The what?" He nods. "New order, new seal, same grain." And just like that, it's over. You step out the next morning into a city that looks the same. Same walls, same gods, same dust. But now, there are soldiers on every corner. Notices etched in Akkadian and Sumerian. New officials, new taxes, new rules, but also peace. Trade resumes. Canals are repaired. The market reopens. People get quiet, then get back to work. Because what else are you going to do? Empires rise. Empires fall. You go home, pick up your stylus, and start practicing Akkadian. You figure it's time. And you realize something strange. This isn't the end of civilization. It's just the next version. It's been a few months since the dust settled. And by now, you're starting to forget what life before Sargon felt like. Not because things are totally different, but because they've become weirdly routine. The soldiers are still here. The palace has a new governor who can't pronounce your city's name. But the market's reopened, the temple priests adapted faster than you'd like to admit, and your scribe tablet now has Akkadian phrases scrawled into the margins. New empire who diss, you mutter while copying a ration log that now includes some kind of standardized weight system that absolutely no one understands yet. But today, you're not doing scribal busywork. Today, you're shadowing someone far more interesting, a high priestess. And not just any priestess, Enheduanna. You're not sure what to expect. You've heard rumours that she's the daughter of Sargon, that she writes poetry in the voice of gods, that she commands both men and deities like it's no big deal. What you didn't expect? She's sitting on a low stone bench surrounded by incense smoke, telling off a priest 3 times her age because he forgot to record a lunar eclipse. You don't even know what a lunar eclipse is exactly, but Enheduanna does, and she's not here for your cosmic laziness. She looks up, sees you, and waves you over. Her robe is made of fine wool dyed a deep blue, embroidered with tiny stars and moons. Her hair is braided in intricate coils pinned with golden rods. She smells like frankincense and resolve. "You're the scribe?" she asks, voice low and clear. You nod. She nods back. That's it. You're in. So here's your historical fact. Enheduanna is the world's first known named author. Not just poet, not just priestess. Author. She lived in the 23rd century BCE and served as High Priestess of the Moon, god Nanna in the city of Ur. Her name appears on hymns, prayers and political writings, an absolute first in a time when most works were anonymous or credited to the gods themselves. She leads you into a small temple chamber. A scribe's desk sits by the wall, along with several jars of ink, reeds and a box of fresh tablets. She picks one up and starts dictating. You write as fast as you can. Her words aren't just devotional, they're raw, full of fury and longing and thunder. She praises Inanna, yes, but also curses her enemies, invokes divine vengeance, and describes personal exile. This isn't polite temple verse. This is spiritual fire in cuneiform. And here's your quirky fact. Enheduanna didn't just write about gods, she wrote as if she were speaking for them. Her poetry, especially the exaltation of Inanna, blurs the line between prayer and possession. It's like reading an ancient mixtape from a goddess who just got ghosted by a mortal and decided to start a war. In between dictation, she drinks water, smooths her robe, and talks politics like a seasoned strategist. Men think power comes from swords, she says, not looking up. They forget how quickly a poem becomes a law. You blink. You're not sure if she's talking about Sargon or someone else. Maybe both. That leads us into today's scholarly debate. How much real power did Enheduanna have? Some historians believe she was a religious figurehead, installed by Sargon to solidify Akkadian rule over Sumer's southern cities. Others argue she held immense independent influence, especially through her writings and position as Entum, the highest-ranking priestess. Either way, her presence in Ur wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. Control the temple, control the people. Later that afternoon, you follow her to a lunar observatory. It's more of a rooftop platform than a building, but it's high enough to see over the city walls. A priest is adjusting some kind of bronze sighting tool, primitive, sure, but still precise enough to track the moon's phases and predict solstices. Enheduanna joins him and points out several stars. She murmurs calculations, mentions tides, planting seasons, omens. You start to realize that this woman doesn't just run rituals, she runs everything. Calendars, agriculture, social hierarchy, divine legitimacy. She turns to you. Do you know why we watch the sky? You shake your head, a little dizzy from all the math and starlight. Because the gods don't speak in words, they speak in patterns, and we, she taps your chest with her stylus, are here to translate. Later, as the stars come out and the priests begin chanting to Nana, she leads you back down into the temple. You'll copy the tablets tonight, she says. Use clean clay, no cracked edges. You nod, trying not to trip over your own feet. She stops before entering the shrine and glances back. History, she says, belongs to the ones who write it. Then she disappears behind the curtain. You return to your scribe desk and get to work, fingers moving faster than your brain. Her voice echoes in your head. Fierce, vivid, utterly unbothered by her gender, in a world where men run almost everything else. And suddenly you're thinking about power again. Not Sargon's kind, not the kind that marches into cities with spears and shouting, but the kind that whispers across centuries, that carves itself into clay and never erodes, that rewrites gods in verse and refuses to stay silent. You look down at the tablet you're copying. Lady of largest heart, Lady resplendent, Inanna, whose storm is unending. And you realize Enheduanna isn't just recording worship, she's recording herself, and she will not be forgotten. You're walking home after another long day of copying hymns and dodging ink spills when you notice something strange overhead. The stars are out sure, but there's a glow to the east pale, flickering, almost unnatural. Not fire, not moonlight. You stop and squint, and that's when it hits you. It's Venus. Or as you'd call it in Sumer Dilbat, the planet of the goddess Inanna, and apparently she's in a mood tonight. You've seen Dilbat in the sky before, but tonight she's bright enough to make dogs bark and priests murmur nervously into their hands. The last time she got this shiny, a war broke out between Umma and Lagash, and someone's fields caught on fire. Coincidence? Maybe, or maybe not. You're about to keep walking when an old man grabs your arm. His beard is white, his eyes milky, and he smells faintly like onions and prophecy. Look sharp, scribe, he whispers. They're watching us again. You blink. They? He grins. The others? Ah, of course. You've stumbled into ancient astronaut territory. You sigh and settle onto a bench. Might as well hear him out. Here's where things get weird, because tonight you're dipping into the delightful, dusty trench of fringe history. That corner of the past where broken tablets and star charts meet conspiracy theories and YouTube thumbnails that scream aliens built this. And somehow, Sumer is always at the centre of it. Here's your historical fact. The Sumerians were among the earliest astronomers in recorded history. They tracked planets, charted the movement of stars, recorded lunar cycles, and developed a sexagesimal, base 60 system for measuring time. Yep, that's why we still have 60 minutes in an hour and 360 degrees in a circle. Blame Sumer. They knew about Venus. They tracked Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, and Saturn, all visible to the naked eye. They even recorded eclipses and comets. Not bad for people using clay tablets and not even a single telescope. But here's your quirky fact. Some modern theorists claim the Sumerians had knowledge they couldn't possibly have had. Star maps too advanced, descriptions of planetary motion too accurate. One particularly juicy example is the Sumerian depiction of the solar system showing the sun surrounded by planets, including one that shouldn't be there. Fringe historians, and let's be honest, a lot of guys with strange hair on late-night TV, argue this is evidence of ancient extraterrestrial contact. Their favourite theory, that the Sumerians got their knowledge from the Anunnaki, a group of godlike beings who supposedly came from another planet called Nibiru. According to this idea, the Anunnaki genetically engineered humans mined gold, and then left, or maybe stayed in hiding. The details vary depending on how deep you've scrolled on the internet at 2 a.m. Back in the courtyard, the old man's voice drops to a whisper. He gestures at the stars. They gave us writing. They gave us kingship. And now they wait, watching to see if we remember. You nod politely. Somewhere nearby, a dog sneezes in the dust. Okay, you say carefully, but the gods in our tablets, aren't they just symbolic? He snorts. You think someone dreamed all this up? The ziggurats, the math, the star maps? You You think clay just invented itself? You open your mouth, close it, and decide this isn't the hill to die on tonight. Still, it's not just late-night mystics who raise an eyebrow at Sumer's astronomical knowledge. Even respectable scholars admit the precision is eerie. The Sumerians weren't just gazing at the sky for fun. Their entire society was synced to the stars. Planting, harvesting, festivals, coronations, all timed to celestial events. Their gods were planetary. Inanna was Venus, Nanna the moon, Utu the sun. To them the heavens weren't distant. They were home to the divine. And that brings us to the scholarly debate. Did the Sumerians believe the stars were gods, or just that the gods lived in the stars? Some texts suggest the former. Others imply the stars were merely tools, divine clocks ticking out fate to be read by trained astrologer priests. It's hard to say because the line between mythology and science was still mud-soft. One moment, a star is a god's eye. The next, it's an omen of war. The moment after that, it's just Tuesday. Eventually the old man stands, pats your shoulder and vanishes down an alley, muttering something about the 11th planet. You exhale, glance back up at Dilbat and head home. Your house feels smaller tonight. Not physically, but in a cosmic sense. You keep thinking about those star maps carved into stone, those planetary cycles etched in clay, and the idea, far-fetched or not, that maybe, just maybe, humanity's first mathematicians were also skywatchers in the truest sense. You fall asleep with a stylus in your hand and dreams full of spirals and glowing eyes. And just before your brain shuts down, one final thought crawls in. Whether the Anunnaki were real or not, the Sumerians definitely saw something in the sky worth building a civilization around. The next morning you roll over, stretch, and instantly regret moving. Your neck is still sore from sleeping with your head tilted skyward all night. Trying to track Venus through the gaps in your rooftop matting, somewhere during your stargazing spiral, you fell asleep cradling a half-finished tablet and a stylus poking your cheek, like the world's least subtle reminder that you have work to do. But not today. Today's not for math or myths or rewriting the cosmos. Today, you're going to glow up. You dig into your reed basket and pull out what might be your finest tunic. Freshly washed, lightly oiled, and, crucially, free of goat nibble marks. It's not a festival day or anything. You just want to look civilized. And here in Sumer, looking the part is half the job. Out in the square, things are already buzzing. You're heading for the quarter where the fashionistas of ancient Mesopotamia do their thing. That's right. Tailors, weavers, barbers, bead stringers, wig makers. Yes, wig makers. You've got options, baby. Let's start with your historical fact. Sumerians took personal appearance very seriously. Cleanliness, style, scent. These weren't luxuries. They were indicators of status, piety, and social competence. Even scribes were expected to show up to temple duties looking presentable. Dirty tunic? You might as well scribble unemployed on your forehead. You swing by a local bathhouse, a public one, more like a glorified water basin surrounded by privacy reed mats. A line's already formed. People scrub their arms with crushed gypsum one guy's shampooing his beard with what smells suspiciously like river clay and optimism. Bathing done, you stop by the barber. Here's where things get intense. Barbers in Sumer are artists. You sit on a low stool while the barber, a man with arms like amphora handles, inspects your head like a sculptor preparing to chisel a block of marble. He hums to himself, picks up a bronze razor, and goes to town. Within minutes your scalp is smoother than a cuneiform tablet fresh from the kiln. The heat, the sweat, the lice. It's all gone. You feel lighter, cleaner, more regal. And now, beard time. Because here's your quirky fact. Sumerian beards were serious business. Not just I didn't shave today fluff, but engineered masterpieces men curled them with heated rods, braided them into patterns, oiled them with sesame and cedar oils, and even darkened them with powdered minerals. The more elaborate the beard, the higher your status. Priests had tidy curls. Kings had thick, tiered, almost geometrically perfect beards that looked like they could recite the law code from memory. And if you were bald, no shame in a wig. The Mesopotamians invented those too. Wigs made from human hair or dyed wool, braided and shaped and secured with pins carved from bone or copper. You opt for a modest chin curl, nothing too flashy. You're a scribe, not a demigod. The barber nods in approval and rubs a dab of frankincense oil onto your jaw. Instant confidence boost. Feeling sharp, you hit the jewellery stalls. Yes, jewellery. This is not optional. Bracelets made from carnelian and lapis lazuli, necklaces of shell and gold, earrings shaped like tiny suns. You try on a simple beaded bracelet and suddenly feel 30% more respectable. The vendor catches you admiring a particularly bold neck piece, layers of gold beads and a central lapis amulet. Only worn by the goddess Inanna herself, he says, eyes gleaming. You snort. Yeah? You have a receipt? He shrugs. She pays in starlight. You buy a copper ring instead. And now we stumble into one of the more fascinating scholarly debates. Was Mesopotamian fashion gendered in the way we think of today? Short answer, yes, but not always strictly. Both men and women wore kilts or skirts, wrapped, tied, and draped in layers. The main difference was length and layering. Women often covered more, especially in formal settings. But jewellery, makeup, and wigs, those were for everyone. There are depictions of men wearing eye paint and intricate headdresses, women with weapons, gods with flowing garments and aggressive eyeliner. It was more about status and symbolism than rigid roles. You walk through the temple plaza, watching the crowd now with new eyes. A merchant in a striped robe is arguing over fish prices. His beard is crimped to perfection. A priestess walks past wearing a shawl embroidered with moon symbols and her hair pinned into an architectural marvel. A child with coal-smudged eyes clings to her mother, who's painted a tiny red circle on her forehead, a symbol of protection. Every outfit is a statement. Every bead has meaning. And then you pass a statue. A divine figure carved in stone frozen mid-stride, beard carved into tiny curls, robe etched with impossible precision eyeliner lines chiselled so clean it puts your barber's hand to shame. You stare for a moment. That statue isn't just a god. It's a mirror. This is what the Sumerians understood deeply. How you look isn't just about you. It's about your place in the cosmos. You dress well not because you're vain, but because you're accountable to your family, to your city, to your gods. You're a walking symbol, a billboard made of mud and gold and good grooming, and tonight you look like you belong in this city. As the sun sets, you sit near a fountain, the water cool against your fingers, and watch the people pass. Each one different, each one dressed for worship, for business, for status, for love, for grief, for power. Civilization, it turns out, is made from more than bricks and laws. It's also stitched into wool skirts, combed into beards, strung on bracelets, and inked into eyeliner lines that haven't gone out of style in 5,000 years. You wake up still wearing your copper ring, which was a power move until it gets caught in your reed mat and nearly rips your finger off. It's fine. You're fine. You look good. Your hair smells like frankincense and confidence. And your beard is still holding its humble little curl. You're ready to face the day. Unfortunately, the gods are not. Today you're heading to the one place more volatile than a border dispute or a barley audit, the divine realm, and you're not going alone. You're tagging along with a priest who's got more incense than social skills and a morning appointment with drama in the heavens. Because Sumerian gods? Oh, there are a lot. You walk through the temple gates, the stones still cool beneath your sandals, and instantly catch the smell of burning resin and roasted dates. A priestess nods at you as she passes, arms full of offerings, jars of oil, bread shaped like stars, a roasted duck on a platter that somehow looks more smug than delicious. Inside the temple courtyard, a junior priest waves you over. You'll want to keep your head down, he whispers. We're doing a full ritual for Enlil this morning. He's not exactly stable right now. Right. Enlil's chief god of air, kingship, storms, and having absolutely zero chill. Here's your historical fact. Sumerian gods were not loving parental deities handing out eternal salvation. They were wild, flawed, and extremely human. They loved, they cheated, they punished entire cities because someone forgot a birthday offering. Their moods were unpredictable, and your job as a mortal was to keep them happy, or at least distracted. The temple is full of activity. Incantations being chanted in droning unison. Statues being anointed with oil. A goat being led into the inner courtyard looking extremely suspicious. This isn't just worship. It's crisis management with incense. And here's your quirky fact. The Sumerians had actual god gossip carved into clay. Not myths, not sacred metaphors, literal drama. One time Inanna tried to take over the underworld by storming in and demanding the throne from her sister. Ereshkigal. She got stripped naked, killed, and hung on a hook. But don't worry, she got better. In another story, Enlil gets banished from heaven for being too into a mortal woman in a field. Yes, the gods get grounded repeatedly. You sit on the edge of a courtyard platform and watch the priest carry a small golden idol, Enlil himself, through the temple to receive his daily offering. He's just a carved figure, but everyone bows as if he's glaring at them personally. He might be. The priest turns to you. Write this down. He's still angry about the barley storage problem. If we don't sing the right hymn this time, I'm not saying he'll flood the canals again, but... You nod and start etching. There's something deeply exhausting about keeping celestial beings emotionally regulated. It's like babysitting a sky full of toddlers armed with lightning and generational trauma. And that leads us into today's scholarly debate. Did the Sumerians believe in these gods as literal beings, or were they archetypes, a way to personify nature and power? It's messy. There's plenty of evidence suggesting they truly believed in divine intervention. After all, they spent enormous resources building temples, offering sacrifices, and writing devotional hymns. But some scholars argue that the gods also acted as tools of state control, a way for rulers and priests to maintain power through divine justification. Why did your harvest fail? Because you angered Enlil. Pay the temple. Try again next year. Still, belief or strategy, the gods were everywhere. In the clouds, the crops, the calendar, and definitely in the local curse tablets. Speaking of which, you pass a scribal bench near the shrine where a woman is whispering to a priest while clutching a broken tablet. You eavesdrop, purely academically of course, and hear the word ex-husband more than once. Here's something spicy. The Sumerians had curses on demand. You could pay a temple priest to write a curse on someone who wronged you. A stolen ox, a cheating spouse, a neighbour whose goat keeps eating your onions. The curse might include phrases like, "May Enlil scatter their grain," or "May Inanna reject their offerings for 10 years. Effective? Questionable? Satisfying? Deeply. You continue your temple tour, wandering into the Hall of the Gods, a dim chamber lined with statues, each one dressed and maintained daily by temple staff. There's Utu, the sun god, with his lion-headed mace. Nanna, the moon god, calm and distant. Inanna, of course, dazzling even in stone, holding what looks like a club and a flirtatious smirk. These statues are more than art. They're avatars, treated like living beings. They're washed, perfumed, given food, and paraded during festivals. Their movements in and out of storage chambers are logged like royal visits. In some cities, priests even reported the gods speaking through dreams or signs, interpreted, of course, by the temple staff for a small donation. You sit in front of Inanna's statue and think about how much effort goes into pleasing a pantheon that operates like a celestial soap opera. There's jealousy, betrayal, power plays, secret births, questionable marriages, and a whole lot of smiting. But maybe that's the point. These gods aren't distant perfection. They're relatable, messy, emotional, unpredictable, just like you, just like your city. And in a world where a flood can wipe out your entire year's work, it helps to imagine there's a divine reason behind it. Even if the reason is Enlil had a bad day. You head home late, the temple bell still ringing softly behind you. The sky is clear, and Dilbat glows calmly tonight. Maybe Inanna's finally cooled off. As you pass the marketplace, you spot a small shrine tucked between two stalls. A bowl of offerings sits on the ground, some dried figs, a coin, and what looks suspiciously like half a roasted mouse devotion takes many forms. You drop in a small bead from your bracelet. No specific prayer, just a gesture, just in case. You reach your house, sit on your mat, and glance up at the ceiling. Somewhere above, the gods are watching. Or maybe they're just arguing again. Either way, you light a small oil lamp and murmur a quiet word to Inanna. Not for protection, just for solidarity. The morning starts with shouting. Again. This time it's not a priest warning you about angry gods or a goat stuck in someone's grain bin. This is official shouting. A town crier stomping through the streets, bellowing about a new law tablet just posted in the city square. You sigh and tie on your sandals. You already know what this means. A crowd. A lot of people pretending to read, and someone arguing loudly and confidently about something they absolutely don't understand. You round the corner and yep, there it is. A clay stealer, taller than a man, covered in neat columns of wedge-shaped cuneiform, still damp in places, freshly etched, and already drawing a swarm of nosy scribes merchants and people who definitely didn't not bribe a city official last week. You edge your way forward and scan the top lines. Your stomach sinks. They've updated the goat theft penalties again. Here's your historical fact. Sumerians had one of the earliest known systems of codified law, long before Hammurabi's more famous code showed up centuries later. The most notable is the Code of Ur-Nammu, written around 2100 BCE. It laid out rules and punishments for theft, assault, false accusations, adultery, and, you guessed it, livestock-related crimes. The laws weren't vague suggestions. They were specific, surprisingly bureaucratic, and very into listing exact consequences. You lie about land ownership? Pay a fine, you cause injury. Compensation depends on the body part. You commit theft. Depending on what and how much, you might be fined, or worse, put to death. And here's the quirky fact for today. One law from a later Sumerian code says if a man bites off another man's nose in a fight, the biter owes 1 mina of silver. That's a lot of silver. So basically, don't go nibbling noses unless you've got cash. You linger near the tablet, listening to the argument already breaking out between two men. One insisting his neighbour's donkey ate his barley, the other swearing it was probably just wind. A priest appears and starts reading the law aloud, his voice echoing in the square. Children squirm. Adults nod grimly. One woman clutches her shopping basket like she's suddenly on trial. And the best part? Everyone acts like they didn't already hear this law 3 weeks ago, in a less fancy version posted on the temple wall. But that's how it works here. In Sumer, law is theatre. The reading of the code isn't just about sharing information, it's a performance. A reminder that civilization is watching, that consequences are real, and that if you build enough tablets with enough words, people might behave slightly better. You wander over to a side table where a group of scribes are copying the code onto smaller tablets for record keeping. You join in, squinting as you scratch out lines like, "If a man falsely accuses another of sorcery, he shall pay 3 shekels of silver. If a slave says to his master, 'You are not my master,' his ear shall be cut off. If a man knocks out the tooth of another man, he shall pay 2 shekels of silver." You pause at that one. You've seen tooth-knocking fights before. 2 shekels seems optimistic. Here comes the scholarly debate. Were Sumerian laws applied equally? Short answer, not really. While the codes read like they apply to everyone, social status mattered. A lot. Nobles got more lenient penalties. Slaves got harsher ones. Women were protected in some cases, adultery, inheritance, but also held to strict standards, especially in marriage and property. Some scholars argue the law codes were more aspirational than actually enforced, like, here's what justice should look like, assuming everyone's sober, reasonable and not bribing the judge. Others say the laws were enforced with brutal consistency, especially when property or temple goods were involved. You finish copying a section about land disputes just as a farmer stomps over with a clay pot and shouts, "This is the exact size of the jar that was stolen from me, I swear." The scribe next to you mutters, "I've written that same jar 3 times this week." You look up and notice the crowd hasn't thinned. If anything, it's getting more animated. Someone's now debating whether selling fake copper weights counts as fraud or just entrepreneurial optimism. The priest rolls his eyes and starts a second reading, slower this time, just to drive the point home. You step back, your fingers stained with fresh clay, and realize something else about these laws. They aren't just rules, they're a memory system, a way to lock behavior into something more permanent than argument or threat. When words are carved into stone and backed by divine authority, people start to believe them. They live by them. They pass them down. And yeah, the laws are harsh, sometimes wildly unfair, sometimes strangely specific, but they're trying to bring order to a world where rivers flood without warning, gods throw tantrums, and your neighbour's donkey really might be planning something shady. Later, you're walking home through the marketplace when you see a small tablet stuck to a stall. It's a mini version of the code you saw earlier, propped up next to a basket of fish. You ask the vendor, "Trying to scare off thieves?" She smirks. "Trying to scare off my cousin. He owes me 2 baskets and thinks I forgot." You nod, impressed. Law as a social weapon, ancient civilization's favourite hobby. That night, you sit on your roof and look at the stars, thinking about the thousands of little rules holding this city together. They're not perfect, but they're something. And you realise the real power of the law isn't in the punishments, It's in the idea that there's a right way to live together. Even if that means occasionally writing "don't bite people's noses" into public policy. You wake to a sound that is both exhilarating and mildly terrifying. It's not a priest chanting or the ziggurat bells tolling, or even someone yelling about a stolen ox, though that will absolutely happen later. No, this sound is commerce, and it's coming from your front door. You peek out and see a crowd gathering at the edge of the plaza. Today isn't just any market day, it's trade day, and merchants from every direction are flooding in like the Euphrates in flood season, except instead of silt they're bringing copper, lapis, and just enough chaos to keep things interesting. You grab your satchel, stuff a small tablet and stylus inside, just in case something needs to be documented or you get into a price war over a fish, and head out the door. Today you're going shopping Sumerian style. The city square is unrecognisable. Tents have popped up overnight like mushrooms after rain. There are canopies made of palm fronds, wool awnings stretched over wooden poles, and carts flipped sideways to double as display tables. You pass a man hawking dried figs while balancing a rooster on his shoulder, like it's part of his sales pitch. It might actually be working. Your first stop, the copper guy. Here's your historical fact. Sumer didn't have much in the way of metal. The region was poor in mineral resources, which meant if you wanted copper, tin, gold or silver, you had to import it. Enter the long-distance traders, intrepid folks with donkeys, boats, and extremely flexible ideas of what counts as authentic merchandise. Copper, in particular, was crucial. It was used for tools, weapons, and everything from fish hooks to the needles that stitched the seams of your fancy temple tunic. It arrived mostly from Oman, known back then as Magan, brought by boat across the Persian Gulf. You finger a small copper knife and ask the merchant, "Is it Magan copper?" He grins. "Of course. I smuggled it past sea dragons myself." You raise an eyebrow. "You mean customs inspectors?" He shrugs. "Same thing. The price is high, but you haggle him down by threatening to report his weights to the temple. This is a bold move, and you're frankly proud of it." Next stop, the lapis dealer. The stone glows blue, deep and luminous, like a slice of midnight sky. It's rare, expensive, and imported all the way from Badakhshan, up in what's now Afghanistan. That's right. Your neighbours wore international bling. Here's your quirky fact. Lapis lazuli was one of the most coveted materials in Sumer. It was used for jewellery, seal stones, inlays and offerings to the gods. And it wasn't just a luxury. It was a spiritual material, associated with divinity, vision and cosmic power. If a priestess walked past you wearing lapis, you did not ask where she got it. You just stepped aside and tried not to embarrass yourself. You consider buying a tiny carved bead, but the price is way beyond your scribe salary. The vendor leans in. "I'll trade you for a song." You blink. "What?" "A hymn. A good one. Something by Enheduanna. I've got a cousin who reads." You hesitate. This is highly irregular. Then again, so is the concept of intellectual property in 2300 BCE. You scratch out the opening lines of a prayer to Inanna on a fragment of tablet. The vendor examines your work, nods, and slides the bead across the table. Barter, art, theft. You'll let the gods sort that out. And now for the real show, Livestock Row. You head to the edge of the plaza where things have taken a turn toward the earthy. Donkeys bray, sheep stomp in pens, goats give you the side eye of eternal judgment. A merchant is loudly insisting that his pigs are practically divine. Someone nearby is haggling for a goose, possibly as a pet, probably as dinner. You watch a boy lead a cow around in a circle while a woman inspects its teeth like she's buying a used chariot. This leads you to today's scholarly debate. How much of Sumer's local economy was actually regulated? Temples clearly controlled big-time trade, overseeing land ownership, rations, imports, even labour. But these smaller, everyday transactions, a lot was based on reputation, ritual, and social pressure. If you cheated someone, word got around, and next week, no one buys your onions. It wasn't lawless, but it was informal. A well-placed curse or an angry neighbour with a stylus could ruin your business. Back near the canal, a group of traders has set up a makeshift auction. Two men are arguing over a bundle of dyed wool. A priestess is overseeing the transaction to make sure neither party shortchanges the gods. You're not sure who invited her. Probably herself. As the sun rises higher, the market gets louder. You hear at least 3 languages, Sumerian, Akkadian, and something else that sounds like a distant cousin of a sneeze trader's slapbacks, shout prices, and sneak quick bites of onion-stuffed bread between arguments. You sit on a wall, biting into a date, watching it all, and that's when it hits you that this isn't just shopping. This is civilization in action. People from different cities, different worlds really, gathering in one place to exchange goods, gossip and grudges, everyone negotiating value in real time, trust and mistrust, skill and scam. It's messy, it's loud, and somehow it works. Back home you empty your satchel, a copper hook, a lapis bead, a folded tablet you forgot to return to the temple scribe. Oops. You sit on your mat and think about the noise and colour and human energy of it all. This is what cities do. They pull people in, they push culture out, and every time you trade a fish for a jar of oil, you're doing more than bartering. You're participating in the longest running hustle humanity ever invented. Economy, commerce, marketplace mayhem, and just maybe the start of globalization, with fewer spreadsheets and a lot more livestock poop. You wake to silence. Not the calm, peaceful kind, the ominous kind, the kind that makes you sit up straight and sniff the air like a goat sensing a thunderstorm. Your house is quiet, the street is quiet. Even the birds have taken the day off and something is off. Then you hear it, a distant drumbeat, slow, hollow, repetitive. Boom, boom, boom. You step outside. The city's not empty, but it's muted. No shouting, no haggling. The ziggurat bells haven't rung, and worst of all, the temples are closed. That never happens. Even during war, they at least leave the incense burning. A neighbour leans over her threshold and whispers, "It's Underworld Day." Ah, that explains it. Once a year, sometimes less, sometimes more, depending on how moody the priests get, the city observes a ritual dedicated to the underworld, not to celebrate it, to appease it, to remind it to stay in its lane. And today you're joining a ceremony that basically amounts to knocking on death's door, leaving a gift basket, and backing away slowly. Let's talk about the Sumerian underworld. Here's your historical fact. The Sumerians believed in a dark, dusty realm called Kur, the land of the dead. It wasn't hell. Not in the fire and brimstone way, it was just bleak. A grey wasteland beneath the earth, filled with shadows, dust and bureaucracy. Everyone went there, regardless of how good or bad they were in life. You could be a priest, a hero, a guy who only ever stole one sheep, and still end up in the same soul-sucking dust hole. You grab a small basket of offerings, bread, oil, a copper trinket you were kind of fond of, and join the procession headed toward the House of Dust, a shrine built to honour the gods of the underworld. You've passed it 100 times without thinking. Today? It looks alive with fear. The priests are dressed in black, no drums, no flutes, just that heartbeat thump, steady and grim. People lay down their offerings in silence. You follow suit. Bread, oil, trinket. Gone. You murmur a prayer to Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld, and hope she's not paying too much attention today. Here's your quirky fact. Sumerian underworld deities were terrifyingly mundane. Ereshkigal didn't torture you. She just filed you away forever. You became a shade who ate clay and drank stale water. If you were lucky, your descendants left food at your grave. If not, you starved. Even in death, Sumerian life required constant admin. You sneak a peek at the priest leading the ritual. He's sweating through his robe, voice hoarse from chanting. Behind him, a young scribe carefully etches the names of the recently deceased into a tablet, not for remembrance, for registration, because the dead, they need to be accounted for, and if you forget them, they might come back. Not in a fun boo way, in a dusty, vengeful, "Where's my bread offering, coward?" way. And now for the debate of the day. Did the Sumerians see the underworld as final, or was there hope for redemption? It's unclear. Some myths hint at return. Inanna famously descended into Kur, died, and returned, but only by sacrificing her husband Dumuzid in her place. Others, like Enkidu in the Epic of Gilgamesh, visited and never came back. Most average folks had no illusions. You die, you go to the underworld. That's it. Resurrection. Rare. Hope. Minimal. Immortality. Reserved for gods and guys with very expensive tombs. After the offerings, the crowd disperses. No cheering, no feasting, just quiet footsteps back into the city, like people leaving a courtroom after a really tense verdict. You walk through the dusty streets and notice how different everything feels. The colours are muted, doors stay shut, even the market is half closed. It's as if the whole city is holding its breath. Back at home, you light a small lamp and set it beside your own ancestors' shrine, a shelf with a few old tokens and names scratched into broken pottery. You pour a splash of beer into a bowl, just in case. And then you lie back and stare at the ceiling, wondering what the underworld really looks like. Is it grey and cold, like the myths say? Do the dead actually sit in a room full of clerks, waiting for Ereshkigal to call their name? Do they remember being alive? Or is it just quiet? Forever? You think of all the people you've known, all the faces in the square, all the names you've copied into ration lists and census records. Where do they go? Is there anything left of them but dust? And maybe that's the real reason for this ritual, not to feed the dead, but to remember they existed, to acknowledge that you too will one day be just a name on a cracked tablet, buried in a courtyard no one visits anymore. It's a lot to think about, especially when you're trying to sleep. But then again, this is Sumer. You live in the first civilization brave enough to ask out loud, "What happens when we die?" And then record the answers in clay. Whether they're right, still pending. The morning after Underworld Day always hits different. There's a strange lightness in the air, like the city's just barely crawled out of a bad dream. Even the goats seem quieter, like they're being respectful, or hungover. Hard to say. You step outside and stretch. The streets are coming back to life. A few merchants are already restocking their stalls. Someone's banging out dents in a copper pan. A kid runs past you, completely ignoring the fact that the gods almost noticed him yesterday. And you? You're heading back to school. Well, not school. More like a dusty courtyard full of clay tablets and children with very mixed feelings about literacy. Today you've been assigned to help at the Aduba, the Sumerian scribal school. Translation: House of Tablets. Less Hogwarts, more boot camp for your brain. Also, your butt. There's a lot of squatting involved. You walk into the Aduba and immediately trip over a pile of broken tablets. Someone was having a rough morning. The teacher, a scribe with permanent ink stains on his hands, and the haunted look of a man who's read too many receipts, waves you in without looking up. "Help them with their signs," he says, voice hoarse from shouting. You join the class and instantly remember why you blocked out your own student years. The floor is covered in clay shards. The air smells like sweat and crushed reeds. One kid is already crying. Another is whispering, over and over like it's a summoning spell. You sit down, pick up a stylus, and try to remember how to explain cuneiform to a group of children whose attention spans are shorter than a barley stalk. Here's your historical fact. Sumerians invented formal education, and Adubus were the first known schools dedicated entirely to training scribes. The curriculum: brutal. Students practice by copying long lists of words, royal decrees, and increasingly complex legal documents, all by hand, all on clay, all while sitting in a squat that would make a yoga teacher cry. One student hands you a tablet. It says, "Fish oil, good fish oil, good fish oil, good," about 30 times. You nod. "Not bad," you say. "Try fish oil expensive next time. That one might land you a job." Most students here are boys, but girls, especially daughters of priests, sometimes attend too. Becoming a scribe isn't just about literacy. It's a career track, a way to enter the temple system, the palace administration, or even the merchant elite. In a world ruled by paperwork, scribes are power. You glance at the teacher, who's now fast asleep in the corner, snoring into a pile of half-dried tablets. Classic. Here's your quirky fact. Sumerian students had tablet tantrums. There are actual tablets with writings like, "My hand hurts," or "Why do I have to do this again?" or even, "The teacher hit me today." That's right, they kept receipts on the emotional damage. You help a kid spell out goat theft accusation, and then duck as another hurls his stylus in frustration. It narrowly misses a statue of Nisaba, the goddess of writing somewhere. She's rolling her eyes. And that brings us to today's scholarly debate. Were Sumerian schools meant to create thinkers, or just efficient bureaucrats? Some argue Adubas were rigid training centres designed to produce scribes who could copy and compute, but not question. Others point to the wide range of texts, proverbs, fables, even tongue-in-cheek dialogues between students and teachers, as signs of creative engagement. There's evidence both for rigid rote learning and cleverness, a classic educational combo. Midday, the teacher finally wakes up and announces, Time for proverb practice. And the students groan, you smile. Because this part, actually fun. Proverbs are the ancient version of motivational posters, but way saltier. You walk past the benches reading their tablets. A scribe who does not know a word will break the tablet in half. A woman who talks too much, her house will fall. Beer makes the heart happy, but the stomach confused. You might have made that last one up, but honestly it should be canon. Proverbs were how students learned grammar, wisdom and sarcasm all at once. Some are weird, some are wise, some are passive-aggressive masterpieces. You help a student write one about lazy workers, then add a wink next to the name of a classmate who's currently snoring against a pillar. Later in the day, the students are tested. Not with multiple-choice quizzes, no such mercy exists here. Instead, they're told to recreate an entire list from memory. Gods, city names, fish species, synonyms for complaint. You watch as one student stares at his tablet like it personally betrayed him. Another cheats by peeking at his neighbour's signs. You tap his shoulder. He turns red. Sorry, he mutters. It's just, I hate writing barley. You nod. Everyone does. Nah. By the end of the lesson, you've helped 10 students, corrected 20 signs, and copied a proverb that might be low-key a threat against the palace accountant. You leave the adubber with clay under your nails and ink on your cheek. Your knees ache. Your back is begging for a better chair. But you feel weirdly proud. Because yes, Sumerian school is exhausting, but it's also how knowledge survives. You head home through the crowded street watching the scribes and merchants and priests. All of them once sat in that same courtyard. All of them once wrote fish oil good 100 times until it made sense. And you think about how strange and brilliant it is that thousands of years ago, humans looked at clay, picked up a stick and said, let's record everything forever. Even the bad handwriting and even the tantrums, even the parts that make no sense at all, and especially those. Because that's the heart of civilization, passing things on, one wedge at a time. Today begins with a wheel, literally. You're walking to the temple when a loud clunk rattles through the street, followed by the unmistakable sound of a man yelling at an inanimate object. You turn a corner and find him standing beside a two-wheeled cart, one wheel now sitting sadly on the ground like it's given up on life. Third time this week, the man barks, shaking his fist at the offending wheel like it's plotting against him. They never fix the axle right. You crouch down to get a better look. It's a solid wooden wheel, perfectly round, chiselled from thick planks, and held together with pegs and rawhide basic stuff. Elegant even. You give it a spin. It wobbles slightly, then rolls into a goat. The goat is not impressed. Here's your historical fact. The Sumerians didn't invent the wheel, but they absolutely revolutionized what to do with it. Wheels had existed before. Small ones, decorative ones, probably spinning uselessly on some Neolithic shelf. But around 3500 BCE, the people of Mesopotamia figured out how to attach wheels to axles and build carts. It changed everything. Transport, trade, agriculture. Your whole world got faster. Or, well, as fast as a donkey can manage on a dirt road. You help the man lift the cart and realign the wheel. He grunts a thanks and hauls it away with a jerk of the reins. The donkey doesn't even blink. You keep walking and suddenly you're seeing wheels everywhere. A brewer rolls a keg of beer down the lane on a cart. A scribe pushes a wheeled stand filled with tablets. Even the potter has a small turning platform in his stall, the kind that spins slowly while he shapes wet clay into perfect jars. This brings us to your quirky fact. The Sumerians invented the potter's wheel too, possibly before they attached wheels to carts. Priorities, right? If you want to be taken seriously in a city of temples and scribes, you better have symmetrical pottery. And here's the best part. Their wheel-based innovations didn't stop at transport and pottery. Later that day, you sit in a temple courtyard helping tally grain rations. The senior scribe opens a box and pulls out a set of circular counters with tiny holes, measuring tools precursor versions of abacuses. You even hear rumours of spinning devices used in workshops to drill beads or twist thread faster. And don't even get started on the calendar, because that's the other great circle they gave us. Time. Let's slow down for a moment and appreciate just how wildly committed the Sumerians were to circles. Here's your second historical bonus. They developed a sexagesimal system, or base 60. Why 60? No one really knows. Maybe because it divides neatly into so many other numbers. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or maybe because they just liked round numbers with strong opinions. Thanks to them, we now have 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle, and approximately 900 math-related headaches in every schoolchild's life. Some scholars argue this obsession with 60 also shaped their astronomy, their agriculture cycles, and even their theology. The gods themselves had numerical associations: Anu, 60, Enlil, 50, Enki, 40. Once again, divinity meets math. You finish your grain tallies, your tablet crowded with neat columns of numbers written in a mix of symbols and stylus marks. One of the temple scribes leans over and mutters, "Base 10s for farmers, base 60s for gods." You nod solemnly, even though you just got caught dividing 60 by 7 and ended up swearing under your breath. And now the scholarly debate. Did the wheel really revolutionize Sumerian life, or was it just a slow-burn convenience? Some historians point out that even after the wheel was in use, a lot of transport still happened on foot, or by boat along the canals. Wheels were expensive, roads weren't great. In some areas, sledges, flat-bottomed drag carts, still made more sense. Others argue that once wheels became standardized, they helped fuel the growth of trade, economy, and eventually empire. It's hard to say, but one thing's for sure. Once wheels rolled into Sumer, they never left. On your way home, you stop at the carpenter's workshop. He's shaping spokes for a new chariot, muttering to himself about axle grease. You ask if you can help. He hands you a small sanding stone. "Smooth edges," he says. "Wobbly carts make wobbly scribes." You grin and get to work. And while you sand the rim of a new wheel, the sun dips lower in the sky, casting soft gold over the city. You watch a line of carts trundle past, each one a perfect little machine clicking along ancient streets. It hits you then. Civilization isn't made in grand gestures, it's made in rotations, slow turns, incremental change, a pot spinning under a craftsman's hands, a wheel rolling through muddy lanes, a calendar cycling through seasons, a clock ticking toward the next temple chant. Round and round it goes, until even time has shape, and you're lucky enough to be living at the moment where the world starts to turn. You wake up to bells, not the normal sleepy clangs of the ziggurat or the high-pitched ting of a temple prayer gong. These bells are tight, rhythmic, precise. You blink, roll off your mat and listen. Ding, ding, ding. Someone's counting something. A moment later, a young apprentice sprints down your alley out of breath and yelling, "The sun's 2 fingers past horizon. The moon phase is steady. The calendar has turned." You know what that means. Time to get chronological. Today, you're heading to the calendar priests, the ultimate event planners of Sumer. These are the folks who track the passage of time with a mix of math, astronomy, and what appears to be a small shrine filled with complicated sticks and shells. The Sumerian calendar isn't just about telling you when to plant barley or schedule a goat festival. It's the backbone of the entire city's rhythm. Civil, religious, economic, even emotional. Everything depends on knowing when something is supposed to happen. Harvest, trade fairs, marriages, moon sacrifices, tax collection, full-scale invasion, all of it must be timed just right. And you're going to learn how they do it. Here's your historical fact. The Sumerians invented one of the first known calendars, based primarily on lunar cycles. Each month began with the first visible crescent of the moon, and they organized the year into 12 months of roughly 29 or 30 days each. Sounds tidy, right? Wrong. Because 12 lunar months only add up to about 354 days, and the solar year is, inconveniently, around 365. So every so often, Sumerian priests had to manually adjust the calendar by inserting an extra month, an intercalary month for the vocab lovers out there. Which month? When? That was up to the temple, no pressure. You arrive at the house of the calendar, which is actually just a rooftop observatory over a tiny shrine to Nana, the moon god. A priest greets you with the twitchy energy of someone who hasn't slept since the last solstice. "Perfect timing," he mutters, handing you a tablet covered in overlapping symbols. "We're recalculating. The barley festival's creeping into flood season again. Can't have last year's mess." You nod like you know what that means. On the roof, another priest is aligning sticks in a small clay device that looks like a cross between a sundial and a very confused spider. You watch as he tilts it slightly to catch the sun at just the right angle. A nearby scribe is taking notes, marking the shadow length, angle of light, and current moon phase. You peek at his tablet. There's a column labelled Days Since Last New Moon. Another one just says Goat Birthing Forecast. It's a full-time job. And here's your quirky fact. The Sumerians used the number 60 as the foundation of their timekeeping, dividing the day into hours, the hours into minutes, the minutes into, well, okay, not quite seconds yet, but they were close. And because 60 is divisible by so many things, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it made for a flexible, modular system that's still the basis of how we measure time today. In other words, you owe your alarm clock to a guy with a stick and a shadow. As the morning wears on, the calendar team debates which month it actually is. One argues for Dumuzid month, claiming the fields are too green for anything else. Another says we're overdue for the month of eating the fortunate feast, which is concerningly vague. Then someone brings up eclipse math, and all conversation stops. Apparently a partial eclipse was miscalculated last year, which threw off an entire schedule of rituals and crop rotations. You ask, so how do you actually fix the calendar? The high priest sighs. We pray, then we argue, then we eat dates and pretend the moon agrees with us. There it is. Here comes today's scholarly debate. Was the Sumerian calendar consistent and centralized, or fluid and locally controlled? Some scholars argue that cities like Ur and Nippur had standardized systems, possibly sharing festival schedules and intercalary months. Others suggest that each city-state adjusted its calendar independently, leading to months that began on different days in different places. Pure Mesopotamian chaos. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Trade and temple coordination encouraged some synchronization, but ultimately the moon ruled all, and it didn't care about your meeting schedule. As the sun reaches its peak, the calendar team finally announces a decision. The current month has officially ended. A new month begins tomorrow, festivities to follow. Probably. They hand you a fresh tablet, a clean slate for the new cycle. You run your fingers over it. It's cool, smooth, and full of potential. Time, Sumer style. You head back through the city, passing vendors who are already adjusting their prices for the new month. A woman mutters, "If they move barley season again, I'm telling Nana myself." A child is scratching moon signs into the dust with a stick. You stop by a public notice wall where the temple has posted the updated calendar. A crowd gathers, groaning over festival date changes and feast day reassignments. One man looks genuinely offended that his son's naming ceremony is now during month of the sleepy crops. You smile. Because despite all the arguing, measuring, stick-pointing and ritual guesswork, the system works. Somehow. Sumer continues to pulse on its calendar rhythm, even if that rhythm occasionally trips over a moon phase or two. That night you lie awake, watching the crescent moon rise. It's sharper than usual. Confident. You wonder if it's watching you as well. You think of all the people across the city marking their tablets, counting the days, setting out offerings for the new month. And you realise they're not just tracking time, they're making it, naming it, giving it meaning. Because without a calendar, it's just a sun that rises and falls, a moon that waxes and wanes, a life without structure. But with a calendar, time becomes a story. And you're living right in the middle of chapter 21. It's a sleepy morning, the kind where the air's already warm and your brain feels like it's still floating somewhere over the Tigris. You shuffle outside, stretch, and look around at the city waking up, exactly like it has every other morning for what feels like the last 1,000 years. But today something's different. You can't quite explain it. It's not just the scent of fresh barley bread from the baker's stall, not the pigeons squabbling on the temple steps. It's the sense that everything around you, the buildings, the language, the rituals, is weirdly familiar. Not just in a "I've lived here a while" way, in a "this stuff hasn't gone away in 5,000 years" way. Today, you're taking a step back, not out of Sumer, but above it. You're going to trace the fingerprints of this ancient world on the modern one. Because here's your realization for the day. We're all still a little bit Sumerian. Let's start with the obvious. Writing. That tablet you pressed yesterday, that stylus you carved from reed, that was the beginning, and not just of writing as a thing, but of record-keeping you wrote to document, to track barley, debt, dates, floods, marriages, prayers, trade, and probably some very salty gossip. Here's your historical fact. Cuneiform was the first true writing system, built not on pictures alone, but on abstract symbols that represented sounds, syllables, and concepts. From there, everything else came. Literature, bureaucracy, contracts, taxes, libraries, scrolls, novels, tweets. Yeah, you can thank Sumer for paperwork and poetry. You walk past a merchant arguing over a broken cart axle and suddenly think, There's probably a tablet about this somewhere. Next up, cities. You live in one. The Sumerians basically invented them. Permanent settlements had existed before, sure, but Sumer gave the world the first full-blown urban centres, with central administration, city walls, zoning, temples, sewers, and a never-ending debate over which neighbourhood has better beer. Uruk, Ur, Nippur, Eridu, these weren't just villages, they were engineered communities, designed for density, powered by trade, governed by law, worshipped by skyline. Cities are still Sumer's greatest legacy. Every time you complain about rush hour traffic, zoning laws, or local festivals blocking the main road, you're participating in one of the oldest human traditions. And let's talk numbers. No, really. Remember that sexagesimal, base 60 system? The one that made you question your life choices in school? It's still here. 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute. 360 degrees in a circle. All thanks to people who figured out that a circle's best friend is a number that divides cleanly into just about everything. And here's your quirky fact. They even gave us the concept of place value in math. That little idea that the 2 in 20 is different than the 2 in 200. Revolutionary. We're not saying they invented the calculator, but they kind of laid the groundwork for it. Next, bureaucracy. No, don't groan. It's what keeps the lights on. Or the torches lit, in your case. Sumerians created an administrative society where scribes, priests and officials worked together to manage grain storage, labour shifts, property disputes and temple inventories. You couldn't swing a stylus without hitting a ledger. And you know what? That's still true. Modern governments, insurance paperwork, tax season. All of that traces back to someone in 2500 BCE writing, 3 goats delivered to the temple. 2 smelled funny. You stop to sip water from a clay jug and watch a caravan unload jars of oil, bolts of dyed wool and bushels of onions. A scribe is jotting it all down, muttering under his breath. Trade networks, another Sumerian specialty. They may not have had GPS or same-day delivery, but they managed long-distance exchange over thousands of miles. From the mountains of Iran to the shores of the Persian Gulf, goods flowed. Ideas travelled, and with them came standardised weights, contracts, and receipts. The glue of commerce. You walk past a set of boundary stones, big carved markers that literally say, "This land belongs to so-and-so, and if you move this rock, the gods will smite you." It's the ancestor of your modern real estate contract, with slightly more smiting. Now let's take a detour to storytelling. You sit by the ziggurat steps, flip open your tablet, and reread a line from the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's full of loss, longing, impossible friendship, and a desperate fear of death. You don't need to be from Uruk to understand it. The emotional weight of that story still hits, still relevant. That's the thing. The Sumerians weren't just builders and accountants. They were humans, and they recorded what it felt like to be alive. They taught us that even when surrounded by gods and palaces, people are still scared of dying, still trying to be remembered, still learning how to grieve a friend. And here's the scholarly debate for the day. How much of Sumer's legacy was truly adopted by later civilizations, and how much simply arose again independently? Did Babylon borrow its brilliance or rediscover it? Did the Greeks reinvent urban life, or just refine an idea that started here? Did we inherit Sumer's DNA through direct lines? Or did humanity time and again return to the same problems and invent the same answers? We may never know, but the echoes are undeniable. You head home as the sky turns pink, the streets still humming with life, people bartering, kids arguing over whose turn it is to carry the water, a priest shouting about a calendar correction no one asked for. And suddenly, it's obvious. Civilization doesn't start and stop. It rolls forward, bumpy and beautiful, like a cart over ancient paving stones. Some ideas are born and die. Others, they ride the wheel. The script you write in, the hours you count, the cities you live in, the debts you complain about, the stories you cry over, they all carry traces of the Sumerians. So the next time someone asks you where civilization began, you can just smile and say, "Funny you should ask." It starts with a dry wind, not the usual breezy sort that kicks up dust from the canals or flutters the hems of priestly robes in a way that makes them feel spiritually dramatic. This wind is heavier, grittier. It tastes like something that's been underground too long and decided to come out just to ruin your day. You squint at the sky. It's yellowish grey. The sun's still out, but it's got that weird filtered look, like it's trying to shine through a layer of regret. In the distance, someone coughs. Not a normal, I swallowed my date seed cough. It's dry, persistent, and all too familiar. You hear a whisper, the rains didn't come again. And just like that, it hits you. Something is going wrong with Sumer. Today you're not visiting temples or decoding moon cycles. You're witnessing the slow unravelling of a civilization that spent thousands of years building itself into a juggernaut of culture, innovation, and sheer bureaucratic willpower. And now it's slipping. Quietly, dustily. Let's dig in. Here's your historical fact. Sumer began to decline around 2000 BCE after centuries of cultural dominance. The reasons are complex and debated, we'll get there. But the signs are unmistakable. City populations dropped. Canals dried up or clogged with silt. Trade routes shifted. Invaders arrived. And worst of all, the tablets got noticeably whinier. You walk past an irrigation channel now cracked and flaking in the sun. A farmer is standing knee-deep in mud, stabbing at the ground with a stick like it personally offended him. It was full 2 seasons ago, he mutters. Now, we chase puddles. It's not just the weather, it's the climate. A major theory holds that Sumer suffered from a long period of drought, possibly connected to broader climate shifts across the Near East tree rings. Sediment cores and ice samples from far-off regions all tell the same story. Less rain, more dust, and the slow, suffocating collapse of the systems that kept everything functioning. That canal that used to feed the barley fields? Gone. The cities that depended on the surplus? Starving. And the cities that depended on those cities? You get the picture. You wander into the scribal quarter expecting the usual buzz. Instead, it's half empty. The scribe who used to shout at you for borrowing his stylus is gone. So is the woman who always got the accounting columns crooked. On a tablet near the gate, someone scratched. The oxen no longer pull, the grain no longer comes, the gods no longer answer. You run your fingers over the words. No poetry, no flourish, just a straight-up panic note. And here's your quirky fact. As Sumer declined, so did the quality of tablets. Seriously. We have scribal records that go from beautifully etched symmetrical lines to rushed, jumbled signs, fewer elaborate hymns. More curses, inventories, complaints. It's like watching a city go from Shakespeare to tax season. But it's not just environmental. There are people involved too. Akkadians, Amorites, Elamites, neighbouring groups who saw an opportunity in Sumer's weakened state. One by one, Sumerian cities were conquered, absorbed, or simply abandoned. The great temples still stood, but the gods inside, quieter, less well fed. No one's leaving offerings when there's no bread. And now we hit today's scholarly debate. What really caused Sumer's collapse? Some say it was salinization, that all those brilliant irrigation techniques eventually turned the soil salty, reducing crop yields over generations. Others blame political fragmentation, too many city-states, too much infighting, not enough unity. Others still point to military conquest. The rise of powerful neighbours like Akkad and later Babylon didn't just disrupt Sumer, they swallowed it. And of course, the big one, climate change. A slow, devastating drought that even the best ziggurat couldn't pray away. Maybe it was all of it. Maybe civilizations aren't meant to last forever. Maybe the weight of being first finally caught up with Sumer. You walk to the edge of town where the wall that once protected your city from bandits now leans inward. Tired and cracked. Outside, the desert creeps closer every year. You can almost hear it whispering, "I was here before you. I'll be here after." That night the stars come out crisp and cold. You sit with a few others by a guttering fire, sharing stale beer and half-joking stories about the good old days, when the temples overflowed, the trade routes sparkled, and everyone still believed in something. Someone asks, "Do you think it's really ending?" No one answers, but you all look in the same direction, toward the sky, toward the moon, toward whatever comes next. And you realize something important. Even as Sumer fades, its people keep living, writing, remembering. Because that's the trick with civilization. It doesn't disappear in a single moment. It echoes, through language, through systems, through the stubborn act of scratching words into clay even when the gods go silent. You lay back on your mat staring at the stars, those same stars Inanna once danced across, and wonder. What do you do when the first great human experiment starts to fall apart? You keep writing. By now you're used to waking up to the unexpected. Drums, goats, priests on existential benders. But this morning greets you with something even stranger. Silence. No temple chants, no haggling merchants, no bleating animals in alleys. Just the low rustle of wind brushing over sun-baked walls and the soft tap of your neighbour sweeping dust off her doorstep. It's the kind of stillness that makes the hairs on your arms rise, like the city is holding its breath. And it kind of is, because today, strangers are walking through your ruins. You hear them before you see them. Voices, unfamiliar accents, the clatter of metal tools and a weird buzzing you can't place. You step out and there they are, sunburned, wide-eyed, brushing sand off stones like they're looking for lost treasure. In a way they are. They're archaeologists. You've been pulled for a moment into a future thousands of years ahead, where your world, the bricks, the temples, the writing, the bones of your buildings, has long since crumbled, only to be unearthed again by people obsessed with piecing you back together. You follow one into a pit carved deep into what used to be your neighbourhood. He squats over a mudbrick wall and whispers, "Early Uruk period, maybe?" Then he reaches into the dirt and gently lifts out a tablet. Your tablet. He holds it up to the sun and frowns. This one's an inventory list. Barley, fish, goat oil, again with the goat oil. You smirk to yourself. Some things never change. Here's your historical fact. Modern archaeology in Mesopotamia began in the 19th century, with European and Ottoman expeditions eager to find the cradle of civilization. Cities like Uruk, Nippur and Lagash were slowly exhumed from beneath centuries of sand and silence. At first, it was all about treasure, shiny things, gold from royal graves, cylinder seals, ziggurats. But what changed everything? The tablets. Thousands upon thousands of clay tablets, dumped in heaps, buried in library ruins, scattered through old storerooms. Most were dry admin records, barley counts, debt logs, warehouse inventories. A few were myths, hymns, legal codes, even jokes. It took decades to even begin to understand what you were really saying. You follow the archaeologists into a structure they call Building M. You know it as the temple storehouse. They're measuring walls, photographing floor layers, collecting pottery shards like they're rare jewels. One holds up a small clay bowl and mutters, "Late early dynastic, note the combed pattern." You think, "That's my breakfast bowl, Karen." And here's your quirky fact. Many of the first tablets to reach Western museums were misread completely. Early scholars couldn't even tell which way the script went. One poor soul read a creation myth upside down and published it that way. For a while they thought Gilgamesh was a god, then a real king, then back to a god again. It took over a century of decoding for them to realize he was just a guy. A deeply sad, occasionally heroic guy with too much eyeliner and a fear of death. The inscription is faint but clear to you. It names the builder, Enhedugal, High Priest of Inanna. They squint at it. This could be a dedication, maybe ceremonial. You smile. Nope, it's a brag. And now for today's scholarly debate. Who owns ancient Sumer? Is it the museums that excavated and preserved its treasures? The modern nations where these cities once stood? The global scholars translating its words? The descendants of the people who still live along the Tigris? It's complicated. Colonial legacies, looted artifacts, and decades of scattered collections make the question thorny. Entire libraries of tablets sit in storage rooms across the world. Some catalogued, many not. Your voice, your life, filed away between receipts and religious tracts. Some want it returned. Others say the study belongs to all of humanity. You don't offer a solution. You just watch as one of the researchers gently uncovers a tablet with a poem etched in it. A love song to Inanna. The lines are faded, but still there, still legible, still yours. She reads it aloud, slowly. Her voice wobbles a little, and you feel it. Your words, written in mud, have survived 5,000 years. Even as empires rose and fell, even as your cities turned to dust, even as your name was lost and your gods forgotten. Someone is still reading your song. The sun shifts overhead. The archaeologists begin to pack up. They log coordinates, bag fragments, take one last look at the site before they leave it to the desert once more. You trail behind them toward the edge of the dig, where the old city ends and the modern world begins. And it hits you, you're not a ruin, you're a beginning. Everything they know, about writing, about cities, about time itself, started here. With your receipts, your hymns, your muddy footprints on the floor of a long-buried storehouse, you're not forgotten, just sleeping. And thanks to a few stubborn, dust-covered dreamers with brushes and books, you're starting to wake up. You're standing on the edge of your city. Behind you, the ziggurat, glowing in the morning light, still defiant. The narrow streets, the mudbrick houses, the scent of last night's incense clinging to the temple walls. Ahead of you, the open plain, flat, endless, dry as ever, and far in the distance, just barely, a new city rising made from the same clay, following the same rules, but different. And you know, deep down, this is the end of one thing and the start of another. Today, Sumer becomes legacy. Here's your historical fact. After Sumer faded, it didn't vanish. It was absorbed, layered over, rebranded. The Akkadians, who had already been living among the Sumerians and speaking their own Semitic language, took control under Sargon the Great. Then came the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and so on. But even as new empires rose, Sumerian culture kept echoing. The language, still used in religious and scholarly texts for centuries. The gods, renamed but never forgotten. The cuneiform system, adapted, expanded, and eventually passed down to others. What you started didn't just inspire civilization, it became civilization. You walk the streets one last time. The baker's stall is still warm. A child is drawing tiny spirals in the dust with a stick, muttering names of stars. A woman is kneeling at a household shrine, whispering to Inanna like she's still listening, and maybe she is. You stop by the scribal bench where a young student is copying a proverb for the 4th time. If a man builds a house and the house collapses and it kills the son of the owner, the builder's son shall be killed. He scowls. This is unfair. You shrug. Welcome to law. He grins, then breaks his stylus. Progress. And here's your quirky fact. Even as Sumerians disappeared from the political map, people still tried to write in their language long after it was dead. Like medieval monks copying Latin they didn't understand, Sumerian became a sacred script, a language of the gods, the cultural version of eternal life. Which brings us to today's final scholarly debate. Can a civilization truly be the first? Some argue there were simultaneous developments in Egypt, the Indus Valley and China, that Sumer wasn't alone, just the one with the best preserved receipts. Others point out that while agriculture and villages existed elsewhere, Sumer gave us the first cities, first writing, first codified laws, first epic literature, first bureaucracy, and first temples that needed actual maintenance schedules. So yes, there were others, but none quite like this. As you leave the city gates, the landscape opens up into memory. You remember the ziggurats rising from mud, the cries of market day, the thunder of Enlil's anger, the sparkle of lapis lazuli under temple torches, the endless scratching of styluses on clay, trying to make sense of life, debt, gods, and grain. You remember how it felt to sit on a roof and wonder what the stars meant, and how it feels now to know that people are still wondering. Because they are. Every time someone writes a poem, or balances a budget, or looks at a map and sees roads meeting in a grid, every time someone pays taxes or files a complaint or tells a story about a long-lost king who fought death and lost. That's you. That's Sumer. You don't need statues or kingdoms or armies to last forever. You just need someone to remember. And now they do. You were here first. You were messy, brilliant, flawed, clever, anxious, creative, and occasionally obsessed with goats. You tried to explain the world by carving symbols into clay. And somehow, it worked. So before you step off the page and back into time, take one last look. You built something, and it never really fell, so that's it. You've walked the streets of Uruk, stood at the feet of towering ziggurats, scribbled prayers to Inanna and complaints about goat thieves. You've counted barley, watched kings rise and fall, survived awkward temple rituals, and possibly invented accounting without even meaning to. You were there when it all began, and maybe, just maybe, you're still here now. Because that's the funny thing about civilization. It doesn't really die. It just mutates, shifts, leaves pieces of itself behind in the way we live, the words we say, the numbers we count on a clock. Summer isn't just ancient history, it's coded into us, in every city we build, every story we tell, and every quiet, scribbled moment when we try to make sense of what matters. and preserve it for someone else. So as you lie back tonight, maybe with a fan humming softly, the room dim, the world quiet, imagine your fingers brushing over the edge of a clay tablet still warm from the sun. Imagine the flicker of oil light on temple stone, the scent of dust, incense, wet reeds, and something faintly burnt. And know this, you are part of something. You are still part of it. So sleep easy, traveller. Civilization is safe for now. Thank you.